Hello and welcome to the We Are Makers podcast. We're Kate and Jack Lenny, a husband and wife team, sharing the stories of makers from around the world. We travel to the makers' workshops, studios and sheds to bring you honest conversations with the people behind the craft, right where the making happens. This podcast is an extension of our quarterly print magazine, our original project born in 2020 from a love of craft and the need to champion makers beyond the digital world. This podcast is a true labour of love, and if you enjoy what we do, there's a few ways in which you can support us. First, subscribe to our quarterly magazine. It's beautifully printed and delivered straight to your door every February, May, August and November, and it's what makes everything we do possible. You can also follow this podcast, leave a review, or if you fancy, buy us a coffee to help us going on those long travel days. Whether you're listening with a coffee in hand or busy making at your bench, let's dive into today's episode.
Just deleted all the last posts that I put up.
Yeah.
Of probably the nicest knives I've ever made.
Really?
So they've been deleted.
So it's still going on?
Oh yeah, it's even worse now.
Really?
Oh yeah,
It's just
getting worse.
the hype's calmed down about it a little bit.
I think people are just fed up, so we can't post any knives. I mean, we don't make a huge amount of knives, so it's not integral to the business.
No. You still make them though.
But I still make them, and I want to be making more, and that's part of the downsize, is that I want to sort of go more into doing that sort of stuff than lots of production work. So yeah, the knives I put out the other day, they're like, we have to delete them.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. Well, you don't have to delete them, they just don't show them to anyone else.
Yeah.
So they can be shown to your
Pointless.
followers,
Yeah.
which is fine. But also you don't know how much you're restricted.
Yeah.
And where
Yeah,
you're
you've
going
not,
in feed.
there's no reference on it.
No.
It's been restricted
and there's
by
no
it.
kind of, you can't talk to anyone about it, and you can't do
course you
anything with it. So actually the last post I put up, I'm like, you won't be able to buy knives. So we used to sell a lot of stuff through Instagram.
Yep.
Now we don't sell anything through Instagram.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not going to do it anymore. The whole platform's crashed, basically. It's
As soon as you try to sell something on Instagram, nobody sees it. It's as if you say, buy this, and it's just like, nope.
unless you're paying
Well, unless
Unless
you
you're paying.
unless
Yeah.
you're paying it. So that's what's happened, is that so the bigger accounts are getting suppressed, so the more established accounts are going lower down the feeds, and then unless you're paying, someone like Blenheim Forge, obviously that's fine, but they spend tens of thousands of pounds a year on advertising to keep their knives in people's, but that's their business, so that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But that also needs to reflect in product cost. Like if you're spending that much, you need to put, where's that money coming from? It has to come from somewhere. Yeah, we've done a lot of paid advertising. It's worked really well for us, but only because our product, like a magazine, works on a quantity basis. The more you print, the cheaper each edition becomes, so you can justify the marketing cost.
Makes sense.
But it's
Yeah, it's just a minefield, like
it is a
advertising.
minefield.
Like,
And it's a minefield I'm deciding to get away from.
Yeah.
So, we've got 50,000 followers, which is an okay number. It's not huge anymore. In fact, it's quite a small
It'd be
account.
a lot of people if they turned up at a shop, though, wouldn't it?
yeah.
Like if they all turned up at your front door one day, you'd be like, oh, we've got a problem.
Yeah, we've got a problem. And actually, probably only 1% of those are actually
Customers. Yeah.
keen customers or keen followers. So they
Yeah.
don't even have to buy anything.
Yeah.
So I'm moving to using the newsletter.
Yep.
So those knives
I
that you've
love our
just seen
newsletter. Yeah.
will only be sold to our newsletter subscribers.
Right.
So they won't be advertised on Instagram. There won't be any stories. So that's where the whole business is moving to a much more personal approach.
I think so.
Definitely getting to
I
talk
think
about
so.
newsletters.
Yeah, I for newsletters for me are the one.
Yeah, and I was trying to work on some kind of subscription service.
Yep.
So you'd have different tiers of subscription.
Yep.
To the top level subscription, you'd get personal invites to the forge, and you'd get your own days here. You'd get things made bespoke.
Like a club kind of thing.
Yeah, basically like a club. Yeah, and you'd have some free, but I suppose a little bit like Patreon, but not. But like that.
On your own
It's
system.
like a physical Patreon, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it is like Patreon. It's just the difference is you're not getting access to digital stuff. You're getting access to this space. Yeah. Donna, we were talking to last week. She done a really nice job of the way she's branded her flower club, because it is like a flower club. So she makes glass flowers, and if you're part of the club, you get extra every month, and they make up a nice bouquet over the course of a year. but it's very much branded as like you're part of the club.
Yeah.
You jump all the queues you don't jump the queues, you pay for a different level of access, and she has certain days a month that she works on that. And from what I could tell, it worked really well.
It's good business strategy.
But also the same like a club. If you go to like a, whatever they're called gentlemen's clubs, but they're not whatever the RAC club or the Garrett club or whatever. You pay a membership, but you don't get free drinks.
No.
You don't get free rooms. You get access.
Yeah.
And you get a sense of community. So that's not that I've had enough time to do, but that's what I want to start to build up, that kind of sense. But it won't be digitally based.
Yeah.
I haven't really spoken to anyone else about it. It's all, so I'm kind of going into analog content making,
nice.
Which is my new thing. So it's going to be physical. So we're designing posters, how-to books, other things that aren't YouTube.
Yeah.
I've tried YouTube, it doesn't really work, and it's
YouTube
expensive.
is a full-time job now.
Yeah.
Like you can't be a maker and a YouTuber. You can we do stuff on YouTube, obviously, but for that to be a primary part of our business, that's the full-time job. Like the long format documentary or the 2 short format documentaries, even the 6-minute one, that's like 4 days work for 4 people to do one beautiful documentary.
Yeah, it's mental.
To get paid a couple $100.
And there's a lot of blacksmiths specifically. There's a lot of craftspeople, and some of them have done, amazingly, and it's an amazing job that they've done. How much time do they actually spend making? This is one of the big debates that have been going on for years. It's like, are you a content maker or are you a craftsperson or an artisan? Can you be both?
Yeah. Well, for a long time, I thought I was of the opinion that you had to be both. It had to be one and the same, but actually I think the internet is changing.
Well, so like Florian obviously has kind of nailed it, but I don't know how long, 10 years maybe it's taken him to get there, or maybe a little bit less.
Down and spoke to him. He was saying that he dedicates 12 hours a week just to the content making, which means he's making drastically less pots.
Yeah.
Like 12 hours a week, 2 full working days of being at a wheel. So
at least 2 days a week. And then how much of his income? But I suppose it's a kind of, it's a balance. His work is more valuable now because he's so well known as a content maker. So it's an interesting sort of. I mean, he's fascinating. I've got some of his. We've been doing this weird project together, but it's brilliant. But that's like saying I want to be a rock star. How many rock stars are there versus musicians that actually make it? And his personality is very much like he's great. It works for what he's doing. For me personally, I don't want to be on screen. I don't want to go, hi, I'm Al, let's make some stuff today. It's not what I'm into. It's not. So we make beautiful films and no one fucking watches them, basically. I mean, use the language, but...
It's because they've not got some young dude, like...
There's
young
no
dude
hook.
or feel just
just got some old crusty geezer in Dorset. And I don't really want to do educational videos. We do sort of, I don't know really what, you've probably watched, I don't know what they call them. They're just kind of like feeling videos about showing people how, we tried a few educational videos, they just bombed. No one's, But I suppose that has to be part of your whole plan.
And it also has to be part of your whole plan for a long, long time.
For a long time,
To see if it, there's no we'll test this for 6 months and see if we'll test this for 6 years and see if it pays off. Unless it's incredible. You look at who's the young lad who's probably the biggest blacksmithing channel, Alex Steele.
Yeah, Alex Steele, yeah.
Yes, so he's like a full-time, he doesn't sell anything on his website now, he's a full-time YouTube creator. And he does some amazing videos, really nice stuff. Yeah. But that's what he does.
And that's what he set out to. I mean, I spoke to Alex when he was like 17.
Right.
You've got to realize I've been in this business for over 35 years. It's got some sort of time frame, but I spoke to him when he was just starting out. We emailed, and it's like his business plan was to be the most successful vlogger at the time.
Right,
that's what he set out to be.
Interesting.
He is an amazing blacksmith, and what he's done is fantastic. I don't personally like watching his films, but that's nothing that's to do with me and not to do with him.
Yeah, he's an entertainer, isn't he?
He's an entertainer, it's like, but that was his focus.
Yeah.
So he makes money from content making.
Right.
So is he a blacksmith or is he a content maker?
Well, true. What that is, it is a really interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, is it because he can blacksmith?
Oh yeah.
But like, and well, like he's it's not a hack job. Like he's very good at it.
Yeah.
But I would say he's a content maker. He's an entertainer.
Yeah,
and he very much is an entertainer.
Within the community, he's regarded as a content maker,
right?
Not as a blacksmith.
Yeah, which is not to say he's not a good blacksmith, but
he's a brilliant blacksmith. Yeah. So for me personally, that I've always stuck to that. What am I? What do I want to be? Who am I? I'm a blacksmith. I make my living from forging steel. And that for me has always been the guiding path.
Right.
And content making or YouTubing or Instagram actually is just a distraction.
Yeah.
And at certain points it's been really useful.
Yeah, of course.
But now it's just I don't want to make films. I want to make stuff.
So that's a really good segue onto it, because one of the questions you said there is, who am I? So
who
are you?
Yeah. Introduce
today or tomorrow or yesterday?
Today.
Let's go with right now.
Let's go with right now. I mean, in essence, I'm a maker. I've always been a maker. So whatever you want to call it, whether it's a craftsman or an artisan or a maker, whatever. That's what I am at heart. Absolutely, 100%.
That's what I liked about when you first came to me with the concept of the magazine, Kate, was maker, because then you're not getting into this, are you an artist, are you a craftsman, or a craftsperson, are you you're just a maker, you make things. When did that all start out for you? You said earlier, so your grandmother was a ceramicist, you were brought up on your mother's knee in front of a jewellery bench.
Yeah.
It feels like quite a straightforward, quotations, lineage to becoming a maker for you.
Yeah, to a degree, but also I'm the kind of black sheep of the family,
right? In
the sense that my dad's a very successful businessman and entrepreneur. I mean, I suppose there's the split kind of in the family to a certain degree. So that, I wasn't brought up making things. I mean, that was kind of my hobby. I suppose the first things I made was Airfix models, probably.
Yeah.
But I was at boarding school for 10 years, so I went through the public school system, boarding school, very formal, traditional. I'm also very dyslexic, so I failed brilliantly. I'm really good at failing exams. That was that side. So there was a kind of a long period, and only when I came back to walking into a jewellery studio in North London when I was 18, did it all click back into place. So I suppose I started really when I was kind of 4 or 5, but being influenced. But actually my craftsman day started when I was 18. Started making jewellery.
So between that 4 or 5 to 18, did you know you wanted to continue to be a craftsperson or be a craftsperson? No,
I had no idea.
Right, okay.
All I knew is that I wasn't any good at anything at school.
Yeah.
So that's
school
what
tries to mold you into something.
Basically that's what you're fed, especially within the public school system. Not that there's anything wrong with it at all. No. And and looking back on it, it's an amazing opportunity. But no, I did. And I think when I was about 16, I started to think, well, actually, I don't want to be, I was a rugby player, and I don't really want to be in that world. I'm no good academically.
Yep.
Started to drift sort of towards making stuff. I mean, I've always tinkered with little bits and pieces in the holidays and fiddling around with stuff. But no, I mean, I've written about it quite extensively. Like, I had literally a blinding moment when I walked into the jewellery workshop, and I knew exactly what I was going to do for the rest of my life.
Tell us about that moment.
Instantly. I still...
Yep,
goosebumps.
Tell
us about that moment when you walked in
30 odd years ago. So I was studying architecture, or I was kind of trying to study architecture. I think my parents wanted me to do something that was a little bit kind of not just going to raves and getting stoned, basically. Right. So I was doing for a lot of time when I was 18, 19, and managed to get into an architecture degree. But as part of the degree, you had to do an external module.
Right.
And it was the kind of strangest thing in a way. So there was sheets of these modules that you could choose. I looked down, jewellery workshop, I went, right, I'm going to do that. And then they sign you up, went to the Polytechnic of North London and walked in there, and I knew that. And I think there was a lot of latent memory. So suddenly it all fitted. You know, a lot of it doesn't, you know, sometimes the words don't really make sense, but it just suddenly, and I sat down at a workbench and the lady said, you know, do you know how to do this? And I was like, yep, I know how to do that. So instinctively, I knew how to do certain things. And she was like, this is really weird. Are you sure you've not been taught? Yeah, right. Like, so I think all that memory was in there. And then
just from seeing it, like
just from watching my mum from a young age,
It just shows you how crucial those young years are. Like,
and you just absorb it. You know,
it's amazing.
And I must have phoned my mum up and said, you know, I'm giving up everything. Or I've started doing this course or whatever. I can't remember. It was quite a long time ago. And she went, don't you remember? I was like, remember what? And she was the one that told me that I would sit at her knee at the jeweler's bench. I don't really remember it.
Right, okay, interesting.
You know, and this is where the lines of memory and story get blurred. So I have very, very slight memories of certain things. Like, she had an old box of gemstones that I used to play with. And I'd sit there for hours just looking at these gemstones and bits of metal and stuff like that. And she said, oh, well, that's fine. So my jewellery workshop's been in storage, waiting for one of my kids to take it up.
Right, okay.
Yeah, cool. It was amazing. She just came around a couple of weeks later with a whole, like, a workbench, which we still got, and her toolbox. Yeah. And she went,
good luck being a jeweller.
There you go. It was really extraordinary, actually. And then everything kind of, from that point, it has almost been it hasn't been a straight line, but I've been on that direction since then.
Wow.
Incredible.
And that's 18 years old.
That's when I was 18, then I left the architecture degree. I was rubbish at it anyway, so it didn't really, you know, it was completely pointless.
You gave it a go.
Eh?
You gave it a go.
I gave it a go. I moved to Plymouth College of Art and Design. I just looked on a map and went, there's an art college, I'm going to go there. And the kind of rest, it's not a history, but that's what I've been doing ever since. But I knew when I walked into that workshop that that's what I was going to do.
Wow,
but it wasn't what you ended up doing.
Well, it is what I do. I still do that.
Yeah.
That's the conversation I'm interested in, because you don't necessarily, when you think of blacksmith, you don't necessarily think of the way you look at materials, which is your unique brand, isn't it? It's the texture, it's the organic shapes. And you often find the best of the best within the making community are people that aren't looking at the craft and the medium in the traditional way. So you ultimately trained as a jeweller to some degree. When did you move over to steel, into metalwork, into the blacksmithing side of things?
Well, sort of almost at the same time. So I did a year of self-taught, and then I was travelling and stuff like that. And then I went to Plymouth, 2 years of jewellery design and making, quite traditional. So it was like a year of just technique.
Okay.
Nothing else. You couldn't, here's a project, that's what you've got to do. And then a year of more design based. But next door to the jewellery workshop was the blacksmithing department of Plymouth College of Art and Design, which doesn't exist anymore, so it's gone. So we would pop in and go and muck around, watch the blacksmiths or the arts. We were art students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know. So it was all kind of rolled into one. And so, you know, my final degree, which I've found some pieces the other day for my degree, well, it was an HND, so whatever, for my final show, I was mixing steel and silver to make jewellery at that point, even really early on.
Right, okay.
And bits of camera. So I was really into sort of like found object and doing kind of putting stuff in glass jars and setting them in silver. And so it was kind of sculptural, slightly conceptual, but still mixing materials.
Yeah. Wow.
So for me, in essence, there's no different. Technically, you say, who am I? So technically, if we were to write a dictionary definition, I'm a metalsmith.
Right.
Mm.
So you don't limit yourself to
No one knows
steel.
what a metalsmith is.
But you still don't limit yourself to steels.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I work in copper this morning. I do, you know, this is all bronze. This is an industrial style bronze. We're using, you know, wood and plastics. And I mean, it's all metal to me. And I think maybe, I don't know if it's not unique by any means, but I don't see the difference in gold or iron.
Right.
obviously they're different.
Yeah, of course.
The way that you work them and your approach, and in fact most metals behave in very, very similar patterns within a range.
Yep.
You take material, you apply heat, you manipulate, it cools, returns back to a solid state.
Yep.
Those principles apply to almost all metals.
Yeah, very much so. It's quite interesting to look at it that way, isn't it? Because in woodwork, you wouldn't say you're an oak worker or a pine worker or a maple worker. In metal trades, we tend to talk about blacksmith and goldsmith and silversmithing.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting, because they're, to all intents and purposes, it's the same hierarchy of the medium you're using.
Yeah.
But we seem to, as people, why do you think that is?
A lot of that is historical. So
Right.
A lot of that's to do with the guild system that was created.
Interesting.
So I think a lot of it is to do with that. You would have the guild of goldsmiths and the guild of metalsmiths and the blacksmiths. I think previous to the guild system, it was a lot about control of information. Like effectively anyone can go out and chop a tree down and make something.
Yep.
But we go back in time, not anyone could have access to metals.
Yep.
Okay, you could go and dig some out of the ground.
Yep.
But do you know how to turn it from raw material to something that's usable?
Yeah.
And those bits of knowledge were kept massively as secrets and under wraps. And
As
so,
little compartments, like this is how you do it for gold, this is how you do it for silver.
so and I think some of it was kind of, gold, silver, copper, they're quite similar, bronze, it's a lot about economics, it's about power, it's about control, it's about weaponry,
Yep.
it's about secrets, so I think naturally the sort of metalworking world grew up very compartmentalized.
Right.
Even just a blacksmith. Most blacksmiths were kept on the edge of a village. They're seen. It's a bit sort of mystical, but it's a lot to do with alchemy, ritualism, and I think as civilization has moved on, that sort of segregation has then sort of moved into the guild system, and then it's gone into separate crafts.
Yeah.
And that's how it sort of dissipated. The tree is the raw material.
Yeah. It's ready to go.
It's ready to go. You've just got to dry it. In fact, you don't even have to dry it.
Yeah.
You just have to chop it down.
You can't green woodwork it if you
Or
want.
you can pick a piece of wood up off the ground, and you can do whatever you want with it. Metal's completely different. And it's similar to glass. Clay, also, you can go and dig it out of the ground and use it.
Yep.
So you have this different, we think like modern people. Well, I'm not sure I do, but, we think in modern terms. If you think in ancient terms, the ability to be able to take a piece of rock and turn it into a knife was so mind-blowing for most people that it was regarded as magic. And a lot of it was regarded as dark magic, as in something you don't understand.
Right, okay, interesting.
So how do you do that? Well, if I know how to do it, I'm not telling you guys, because then you'll go and do it, and I lose my status. So, this is about economics, power, status, control, all these kind of different things.
Especially back then, where you couldn't find it out any other way than asking. Because you couldn't even go and ask the guy in the next village, because that could be 3, 4, 5 days away to go and ask that question.
And he wouldn't tell you anyway.
Exactly. No. And then you go to the next one. Like, how long do you end up going?
Yeah, and there's this kind of, the subsections of that. But there's an interesting fact that, so with high carbon steel, it was traded between Europe and the Near East, the Far East, Damascus and that part of the world for about 800 years without us really knowing how to produce that particular type of steel.
Really?
For trading it for 800 years, we were trying to work out how this super steel's made.
And it was still better just for us to buy it.
And you don't know, and you haven't got the raw materials. And if you have got the raw materials, how do you do it? We think in time frames of, gosh, a week's a long time, isn't it? If someone doesn't send you back an email in a couple of hours, you're like what the hell's going on? They were talking about like dozens of generations of people trying to work things out.
It's so far from what we know.
Yeah.
So we don't even think in the same brackets. When you're forging a knife, people go, well, it would take you 20 minutes or something to make. You go, well, sometimes we spend like 26 hours on a single knife. They're like, why? Because we don't have the same way of thinking about things anymore.
Interesting.
It is really interesting. I'm thinking like the amount of time. So I'm on a big push now. I only check my emails once a day, and I've been trying to instill this into Kate for exactly that reason. It was invented as an indirect mode of contact. You had phones and pagers and emails, right? And that's on the sort of micro looking very recently in the span of time. And then in the same conversation as we were talking about emails literally a couple of hours ago, and now we're talking about stuff that's 800 years to try and work out something that now is available on Google, right?
Yeah.
But what's then really interesting about that for me, especially in the blacksmithing, is like, to all intents and purposes, I'm not a professional blacksmith or a blacksmith by any stretch of the imagination, it's still very similar techniques that you're using today.
Yeah.
So where did you learn all those techniques?
Well, I learned them at art school. I'm effectively self-taught. So I don't really have any authority to be talking about blacksmithing because I wasn't apprenticed to anyone.
Right.
Went to art college. I personally have a natural predilection towards metal.
Yeah.
So I picked it up very quickly. So I did the 2 years of jewellery making, 2 years of architectural metal work, and then I basically spent 20 years moving around, working for other people here and there, setting up my own workshops, doing jewellery, doing blacksmithing, doing welding work, bronze, So it was sort of kind of learn on the road, really.
Yeah.
And then years of just working on, for 20 years I worked on my own, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, just tinkering away. We have to go back before the internet, and we have to go back before mobile phones, where there was no, when I was at art college, there was no real information floating around. Okay, there were books, there were magazines, you'd go and speak to someone, you'd work it out yourself. Yeah. So that's how I learned. It's just by doing it.
Yeah,
and I think maybe that's also why I have a slightly different approach. So I'd have a non-traditional approach. So lots of things I do aren't traditional in any way. Although through studying and learning more of the history, it turns out we're probably more traditional than a lot of people think. Mm-hmm. So it's all a bit of a kind of mix-up, but mostly learnt through studying the material. I mean, how else are you going to learn something? You go,
you should just get stuck in. And...
I just made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
I suppose when I went to Sweden, this whole thing, I changed direction. I learnt from a guy who was like an 8th generation edge smith. He's learnt from all these people. Books have started appearing.
What did you call him there? An edge smith?
He's an edge smith, so they specialise in making edged tools.
Right.
Axes and knives and that kind of stuff. So and as the internet's come up and as Instagram has exploded and as things are being reprinted and as the interest in blacksmithing is expanding, more and more books are, have surfaced, or you find out more about them. So you're going to read them and go, well, that's sort of something I've been doing for years. Anyway, there's a kind of natural process. So traditionally there are only 7 blacksmithing techniques.
Okay, tell me about that.
you have to read my book. But so there are 7 traditional techniques, and there are sort of subsections to those 7 traditional techniques. There are always some little bit of debate about whether this one is a kind of a primary technique or a kind of subsection. So we don't need to get too into what they all are, but a traditional apprenticeship you would have learnt, which is 7 years, which I didn't do, you would have learnt to master or to at least excel in each one of these 7 techniques.
Right.
Okay. With those 7 techniques, you can combine them into an almost infinite amount of results.
Right.
Sort of 7, it's like if you went into a kitchen and you have 7 ingredients, and that's all you're ever allowed to use. How many dishes
different
can you make?
Different quantities, different orders, different X, different Y, different Z. Using those makes different thing.
Yeah.
Really simple on the face of it.
Yeah.
Not so simple if you're trying to do it.
No, not really. And actually, I've only learnt a lot of this stuff much more recently. So So I went to Sweden in 2014, I think. Basically in 2013, I was going to give up because I'd had enough already. So I'd already been...
Right.
It was a whole other story. But so 2014, I went to Sweden, and in essence, and I've written this quite a lot, is that I might have been had been metalworking for 18 years before I went to Sweden. But I've only really become a blacksmith in like the last 7 or 8 years. So I may have been in the trade for a long time, but I didn't really become a blacksmith until quite recently. And that's a mentality.
That's what I was going to ask. What is becoming a blacksmith?
Yeah, that's not about
to you?
technique. You know, I know some people who are technically brilliant, but I don't think they're very good blacksmiths.
Talk me through that.
This is like a psychology. It's about partly about a way of life, about how you approach things, and about your respect to the past, but also your desire to move things into the future. So it's like a lot about a lifestyle, and I don't mean a lifestyle, living in a caravan with a big beard and a leather apron, and not that sort of lifestyle. A lifestyle of immersing yourself in the world of your craft. It could be a different material altogether. So I think I was just kind of metalworking for a long time, but not until I really understood what it was all about did I become a blacksmith. But that's just me personally. I mean, that was only my own personal kind of...
So what was it all about to you? What is it that you really understood and took from it?
From that point?
Yeah.
I think I started to really understand the material for a start, and I started to understand my approach to it, and to maybe give myself a little bit more self-respect, a little bit more appreciation for the traditions of where we were coming from. And I kind of started to study more about the history of the trade. I think up until that point I was, there's a little bit of kind of post-industrial revolution attitude in Britain about it's okay, I'll use any old thing, make, do and mend, which is good. But it's like we've lost a lot of our traditions, or they've certainly faded quite a lot.
Certainly.
And going to Sweden and studying with the guys there and having more conversations, about respect for the craft, I think, and about self-respect and about what we're actually doing, which is separate from just hitting bits of metal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the mental approach, I think, changed quite a lot.
How did your work change alongside that?
Oh, radically. I mean, massively. So no fabrication. I used to do quite a lot of fabrication. It's easy to make money if you're welding. I mean, that's much easier, and it's much faster and simpler process. There was the approach, and I always have to bring myself back to it. We were talking earlier about the business. So the business takes over, and you suddenly find yourself trying to do things a little bit quicker, or, leaning towards cutting corners. And it's like, no, take your time. And it's hard to maintain all the time, but take your time, approach the material, put yourself into the right mental state, have respect for what you're doing, don't try and cut corners. Just little things like that.
Easier said than done in a capitalist world. How have you stuck to it?
I haven't always. We've got to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
we try not to cut corners, but it's like sometimes you think, well, I think it's... I used to work with this guy called Ed Hunt, who's an amazing knife maker. He stopped making and Ed was always like, that'll do isn't good enough. It's like, oh, that'll do, it'll be all right. That's not an attitude that you can maintain. Now, sometimes if you're making something for yourself or you're making it for home or whatever, it's fine. It's like, yeah, that'll be all right, fine, da-da-da. But if you're making something for a customer, a paying customer, you have to try and make the best thing you can possibly make at that particular time.
Yep.
And it's that mental approach of like, don't try and cut corners, or if it's not good enough, let's make another one. Difficult to do in a capitalist society because you're thinking, well, that's just taking me 5 hours. I can't then charge for another 5 hours. Yeah. So a lot of the time we were making stuff for free.
Yeah.
I mean, a friend of mine who's another blacksmith worked out he was on £6.45 an hour. He's been at the forge for 30 years.
Wow.
And he said he's not going to do that equation again. You know,
it's quite scary when you do that.
It makes a good living, but if you extrapolate the amount of hours that people work across a lot of businesses, chefs and craftspeople and all sorts, and you guys, if you put it down to an hourly rate, you know, it's horrifying. And sometimes you can't necessarily afford to go and make it all over again, you know.
Yeah.
It's a balance, and I think sometimes the balance swings. As I get older, I'm swinging so much more into in fact, today I was just thinking, could I just make one thing a day? And that's all I would do for a year. So if it was a spoon, that would be my one thing. Or if it was a knife, that would be my one thing. And just to have a whole day for one piece of work.
Yep.
But it's quite a nice project. But just to have that time spent, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would that product be that could command a high enough price to, you know, would a sugar spoon command a high enough? It would have to be a real good sugar spoon. Do you know what I mean? That kind of
Or
thing.
some days you make more and some days you make less.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I mean, we're always constantly toying with these different ideas. And I think, you know, it's quite multifaceted. So yes, we have principles and we try and stick to our principles, and we have a sort of moral compass from a business point of view that is uncompromising.
Yep.
We don't sell things that we don't make. I have occasionally, but the makers are recognised. We don't import things, finished products from overseas. You know, there are a few sort of basic ground rules as a business. People have tried to get me to make stuff overseas and that sort of thing. But you have to try and stick to as much as you can.
Yep.
But also there's a reality of I've got children and you know, and a wife and a house, and we've got to feed people. So, you know.
Yeah, you still have all of society's burdens to.
There's a lot of balance, and it's a juggling act, and sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, and it's like now I'm on a kind of trajectory away from all of that. This thing of the social media we were talking about earlier draws you in. It's so easy to make money from content making. I mean, I'd make 5 times the amount of money by just making videos. But for me personally, that is a compromise, and that's like a cop-out in a way. Yeah. It's not for other people, just to make that clear. That's their choice and their path.
For you personally.
For me personally. Yeah. So this is about, we are makers. That's the title of it. Why are we makers? What is it about? You know, you're not a maker to make a lot of money. I mean, I was publicly school educated. I could have gone and worked in the city. Yep. In fact, most people in the city are not that bright anyway, but you don't need to be a genius to go and make a lot of money if you want to. Yep. So for me,
you do need to be pretty bright to balance all of this and make a life for you.
Yeah, it's quite the...
It's quite the undertaking. So we were having this conversation with someone the other day, and I think we're trying to be better at it, definitely. We're talking about just the car on the way down, like what have we all achieved this week, and we're trying to take stock of what we're achieving in a week, and you do think, you're like, this seems like we should be doing more, or it seems like, yeah, of course, anyone could do that. And actually you sit back and go, nah. They'd have thrown the towel in a long time ago.
Yeah.
And it's even like your man there that, 30 years worked out he paid himself £6 odd an hour. Yeah. What's the trade-off between being able to do that solidly for 30 years and being happy doing that versus making £20-30 an hour for a couple of years in a job that you absolutely hate? Living away from home, or talking personally now, living away from home doing a job that some days is just garbage. Yeah. To make more money because it looks nice in a bank account versus what is the payoff? And that goes back to we are makers. Why are we makers?
Yeah, exactly. It's a drive. It's an unknown. Yes, of course. You could go, and I think probably it's wild generalization, but I think a lot of people work in jobs that they don't really enjoy. Mm-hmm. My approach has been I would rather enjoy 5 days of the week at work and be a bit skint at the weekend instead of getting paid lots and living for the weekend. So it's not all roses, and a lot of the times it's very stressful, and probably for the last 2 years I haven't slept for various reasons. But I think the overarching core of it is at the end of the day, you can go, I made that. You know, we're talking about the psychology of making, okay? So if we want to understand why an individual is doing something. So very dyslexic as a child, told for years you're just plain stupid because that was the 70s and 80s approach to dyslexia. And I'm not immensely bright anyway, not particularly good at sport, serious self-confidence kind of issues. And the first time I walked into that jewellery workshop and made something, my life changed. Yeah. It's like, no, I didn't make that one actually, but it might something I did make. You know, no one can take away from me that I've made that.
Yeah.
I don't care if I don't sell it. In fact, I'm not selling. In fact, the more things I make, the less I want to sell them. So there's about confidence and self-worth. And this is the amazing thing of makers, craftspeople, artisans, cooks, people who create physical objects, writers, whoever you want to say. You know, there's a real sense of self-worth. Yeah. Now, I think going back a bit, you said what changed when I went to Sweden is I discovered absolutely my self-worth.
Right.
You know, I think right from the beginning, I discovered a sense of self-worth. All my teachers were wrong. I can do something. You know, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And when I've taught other people who have that, you know, dyslexia or whatever, you can see it click. You can go, no one can take it away from you. Yeah. If it doesn't sell, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You know, this is the legacy.
Yeah. Especially when you're making products that last forever.
Yeah.
It's what's certainly been so attractive to us about metal workers, woodworkers, glass, ceramic. Most of the people we feature are all people that are making things that will last forever. Yeah. Right down to bookbinders, you know, it's stuff that in hundreds of years' time it will still be there. Like that, one of your knives could still be doing the job in 100 years' time. Yeah. You've put something out into the world. It's again why we never went for a glossy or a newspaper style. We went for like a coffee table book. Yeah. If the internet goes down tomorrow, it's a real thing that's there. And that's the core of it, I think, that we more and more start coming back to, is that if, you know, we often say, like, if the internet goes down tomorrow, we still do what we do. If the electricity disappears, we can still do what we do. Yeah. There's nothing stops us. You know, so it's slightly apocalyptical, but, you know, we carry on anyway. And I think that's why I sort of not into content making as much as probably it should be, because there's a sense of disreality. It's not really real. Yep. Of course, it's good for some people. For me, I want to make books. I've written books. I want to write some more books. We're making these little booklets of how to make an axe or how to make cutlery. We'll give them out or sell them or whatever. Posters that people can. It's a physicality.
Something really nice.
I love a book.
But it's a physical manifestation of one's kind of desire to make things.
Yeah. And have real things.
Yeah, and have real things. Yeah.
Things that can't. Even, I mean, going back to books, even reading on a screen. We definitely do have a digital reader, and we put up when editions sell out with them, so the stories aren't lost forever, like, because we do limited print runs. But man, like a good book. Look at a lot of my old engineering books. Some of my structural engineering books were Kate's dad's when he went to college. Like, and they've not changed. No. Soil's still soil, steel's still steel, you know? There's something really nice about that, and there's something really nice in this day and age about putting physical things back out there. Yeah. We've had nothing but problems with, especially this last 3 months with distribution. It's hard. Like, it is hard work of like getting a book to a customer these days. Yeah. But if we wouldn't get the same feedback, and I'm sure you're exactly the same. You wouldn't get the same feedback as if someone had just read a blog article. Someone sending you a picture of the book, or you know, someone will send us a picture of the book. They're sitting out on their patio somewhere that we would rather be rather than the house reading, right? You know, and it's a cool thing. You're creating physical objects, and I do think physical objects often tie to experiences much better. Nobody remembers where they were sat when they were reading the blog article. They do when they were reading a good book. Yeah, they want to carry objects with them. You know, is that sort of physicality? Absolutely. Yeah. So you moved from Edgemate. Tell us more about so you studied with a master in Sweden.
Yeah. Well, I didn't study. Well, I didn't study so much. I went on an 8-day course at Gransfors Brooks, which is this famous...
Was it at Gransfors?
Was it? It was at Gransfors. I did that.
That's the first axe Kate ever bought me for my 21st birthday.
And I saw an advert in the back of their book. Basically, I was going to stop. I was just burnt out, and I bought an axe making book or the tool making book off the
Another one.
Off the internet, slightly pissed one night, and in the back of it there's a tiny little advert that says come on a course. Mm-hmm. Saved up for a couple of years, and I went on the course, met Frederick. Didn't really even say much to each other. It's just you meet a kindred spirit, you know.
Yeah, right.
And it's like he wouldn't even say very much. He'd be like, you think that's okay? Kind of look.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, okay. And it, you know, what I learned was humility. Actually, was about being humble, and being humble in the face of the weight of thousands of years of knowledge of blacksmithing. And that's really, I think, is what was confronting. That I'd skipped a lot. You know, there is a traditional...
Especially in a place like Gransfors.
Especially in a place like Gransfors. But also, having gone through, you know, art college, I didn't do a traditional apprenticeship. I don't know how to make... Well, I do know how to make scrolls, but, you know, I don't do that kind of shit. It's not my... I didn't know how to... I'd never fire welded anything. You know, all these kind of fundamentals that you're meant to do. And there's no right or wrong. What's nice coming from a completely different approach is you have a different approach. But what I then went to do is went back. And then I came back to the UK. I started to learn how to make my own tongs, how to make my own tools, how to make tools for my kids that had just been born. I wanted them to have their own tools. We've still got them. Nice. You know, they've got a pair of tongs and a hammer and bits and pieces. They don't want to be blacksmiths, but I wanted to make them.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make tongs. Okay, so learn. Okay, I don't know. Right. There's a book. You know, and I suddenly started to kind of join all the dots up.
Is it true that
so I only went for quite a short course, but subsequently I started to run courses with Frederick. He led, and I was his assistant in axe making courses. So I didn't teach axe making for 4 years, I think, after I've been to Gransfors. I wouldn't, because I didn't know enough. A lot of people now will go on a 1-day course and start teaching. That's a whole different...
That's a blight of the internet right now.
And then after a couple of... it was probably 2 years, I think. And after a couple of years, I said, well, you're okay to go off on your own now. You can run the courses. And then... But I go back to Sweden every year to go and see him, if I can. You know, obviously COVID year's out.
Yeah, of course.
And I go on my sort of annual pilgrimage back. Just to reinforce and we... chatter about stuff, you know, I might phone him up and go, you know, oh, how do I do that? You know, you never stop learning.
Oh, yeah.
And he learned too, because we have, you know, a really different approach. He will learn from the way that I make things. So that's what it was about.
So somebody at Gransfors, though, recognising your ability, because they must have recognised your ability, stroke talent, whatever you want to say, if they invited you to even just help on a course. So for anyone that doesn't know that's listening, Gransfors Brook, larger axe makers in Sweden, you would call them. Like they pump out a good number, but each maker still initials their own tools. Yeah. So you get like mine's are TT,
which is my master's brother.
Is it?
Yeah. That's so funny.
That's interesting.
That's really cool to put the connection together.
So TT,
they still very much take a lot of pride in the work that they're doing, although it's sold under the Gransfors Brook. So they're a very prideful company from everything I've seen about them and the very little by comparison I know about them. He obviously seen something in what you were doing. But earlier in this conversation you made a clear point of saying you don't have the authority to say, when we're talking about how to make things. Why do you feel you don't have the authority to say that?
I suppose because I'm still learning.
But will you ever stop learning?
No, I won't never stop learning. I think what I sort of meant by that, in a sense, is I didn't come through the traditional route. I probably do. I have a certain amount of authority, but I don't think authority is the right word. I can tell people how I think things are to be done from my experience. I suppose because I don't have any certificates. Yeah. I'm a member of the Swedish Guild, but you know, I don't have a silver medal from the Worshipful Company of Blacksmiths. I don't have a formal training. I wasn't apprenticed to someone. And within certain circles, that appears to be quite important. For me, it's not so important. I will give any information to anyone who asks about anything that I've learned. I suppose people sometimes go, so how do you know that? And the answer is, sometimes it's instinctual, but also sometimes it's like when you've spent probably 50,000 hours on an anvil hitting things, you kind of start, and that's what I mean about becoming a blacksmith. Not just being a blacksmith, and like I said earlier, sometimes words don't make sense. It's like it becomes so integrated. I could never forge again. I could stop, but I can't stop because I'm addicted to it. But and I would still be a blacksmith, I think, in my mind, in the way that I see the world and my sort of personal philosophy and that kind of thing.
And how translatable is that to everything else you're doing in life as a blacksmith? Do you think you would have the same outlook if you were a woodworker or if you were a glass artist or...
Yeah, I think so. If that was my material. I mean, I think everyone has a predilection towards different materials.
Yes.
So some people, sometimes we get amazing woodworkers in here and they're absolutely terrible at metalwork. I'm really bad at woodwork.
Right, interesting.
Ceramics, used to be quite good at, but in glass I can understand. It's just the way your brain is wired, But I think everyone's good at something.
Yeah.
Some form of making. Could be painting, could be drawing, could be everyone's creative in their own way. I just happened to instinctually understand what metal's going to do. I don't always get it right.
Yeah.
But I do have an instinctual understanding.
Do you think there's something in the fact that you could understand a bit of glass, a bit of ceramics, like they're not reductive nor are they additive. They're kind of moving material for the most part.
Yeah.
Woodwork is reductive. 3D printing or digital fabricating is additive. Do you think that people, and it's only your personal opinion, that people kind of gravitate to one or the other? Like if you are good at the moving of material, which is maybe more sculpture based, it kind of, to some degree, doesn't matter what the medium is. It's the moving of material. Or if it's woodwork, it's the reduction of material. And then there's obviously a lot of stonework, like a lot of wood carvers and stone carvers kind of go together.
Yeah.
Do you think it's more in the process or the material that people are drawn to?
I think it's the material.
Right, interesting.
Because I think you can get someone, some blacksmiths are amazing at doing figurative work because they can see in much more 3 dimensions. My approach is very linear. It's not very, it is 3-dimensional, but I can't make, I couldn't make a person.
Yeah.
I can't draw to save my life.
Oh, really?
No, I'm terrible at drawing.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
But I don't draw, because I don't draw. Well, there's no drawings around. I mean, there's almost none done here. I sketch directly into the material. So if I have an idea, I'll scribble it, we would draw it on the floor, might go on blackboard, and then I just go make it, and then I make it, and then I make it, and I make it.
I find it very difficult to work that way. So
Well,
that's
different.
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Because there is no right or wrong way, and I think for anyone listening to this, that's the important bit. There is no right or wrong way.
You can see the sense of my work. It's very sort of, and in a sense it's quite architectural because it's quite formal shapes, lots of texture, but these plates are heavily textured, but they're almost perfect circles, that kind of thing. Some people are really good at producing ram's heads or people or faces because that's how their minds work. It's still the same material though. And it's like woodwork. Some people are amazing at making furniture, but they're terrible wood carvers.
Yes. Straight line versus organics.
It's straight line versus organics, and I think it's just the way that I suppose it's partly your interest and maybe partly the way that your brain is configured.
So we're all unique, right?
Yeah.
It'd be boring if we're all the same.
It'd be boring if we're all the same,
Yep.
exactly. And I think part of learning about being a craftsperson, I suppose about being a human, is understanding oneself. So I stopped doing architectural ironwork, although it's much more profitable, because I'm dyslexic, and I'd make gates that were like 300mm too big.
Right.
Which is pretty silly, really, when you're making a gate which doesn't fit, because I can't read numbers.
Right.
I can read numbers, but often they are reversed. when I look at them. So what I started to understand is, don't do site work. Let's not be an architectural blacksmith. What do you like doing? What is it in yourself? I mean, fundamentally, I'm very, very selfish. I make to fulfill my own desires.
You made this point in the edition 1 write-up. You were a selfish maker. And to this day, I'm sure you're the only person that's ever, but it completely made sense to me at the time. Talk us through that, a selfish maker. Because when you think of selfish, it's often framed negatively. Yeah. But actually, it's for very, very, very good reason, a very positive way to be.
It's, I go often say that it's like if you're in a plane and you have the safety talk and the plane's going down or it loses oxygen, the air stewardess says, take your oxygen and give it to yourself first so that you can help other people. I know it's quite a strange...
That's a great way to put it.
Analogy or whatever it is. Yeah. It's like and this is how I sort of try and live outside. I'm not always very good at it, and sort of tried as a parent to be a bit like that. I'm a terrible parent, so I probably failed at that as well. But you know, it's like if you have a burning need to make things, if you deny that, it will have a negative effect. If you can fulfill that need and that necessity, in principle, it should make you a better person to be around, and so then you can help others. Now it's very difficult to do, but I have a desire. I mean, I am hooked on making. I mean, I get a physical buzz.
Yeah.
I mean, I've spent a lot of my life taking drugs, like a lot of drugs, for a long time.
Yeah. And blacksmithing's still the best of the drugs.
It was the reason. Probably the reason I was still alive, because I got more of a kick. Yeah. And I couldn't function as a craftsman when I'm out of it. Yeah. So that has become, it is an addiction. It's kind of like a physical addiction, but it's a positive addiction. And it's also that you can be selfish in a positive way. I make to fulfill my own, I don't know, whatever. Maybe it's my own, trying to build my own self-confidence, or when you make something and it's there and you see it, it's fucking amazing.
And it can't be taken away.
It's just, you're on a high. Yeah. Also, you go low when it messes up. You know, there's definitely a lot of swearing and stomping. And
when it's low, it's low.
When it's low, it's low.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you learn to, and in fact, much more so. Nowadays, if I make a mistake, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not perfect. Okay, let's move on. Yeah. That, I think, you have to learn as a process, not to have too many sort of paddies and not to kind of like back out too much and go, oh, I'm terrible. You know, I used to go into these quite dark depressions, go, oh, I'm never good. I'm no good at this. I can't do that. Or this guy's so much better than me or whatever. But as you get older, you have to learn to not worry about that. But fundamentally, if I didn't have to sell anything, I'd be quite happy. I'd still make things. Yeah.
So if you won the lottery, you'd still do exactly what you did?
I would still do it.
Yeah.
That's a really good sign, isn't it? It's interesting you say previous with drugs and getting the biggest, because Sam Gleeson said exactly the same. Exactly the same. And he wasn't the first maker to say it, you're not the second, you're not, like, it is an ongoing thing. Yeah. The second thing to come from that is, I strongly believe if you're not serving yourself first, you can't serve all the other people around you. Yeah. And it's the exact analogy you said about the oxygen mask, isn't it? You just can't do it because you're not going to turn up as the best version of you.
No, and I think people struggle with it in the kind of modern, especially within a family unit. I can't often say to my wife, look, you need to take more time. She's completely selfless. She's like, oh no, I'll do everyone else first. But actually it can be negative. It's like, Donny, you've got to go and
do you.
Remember to be you and remember to,
And to take time, or whatever it is, to feel a little bit more grounded, or to say, and I think people are afraid of being selfish because it has a negative connotation. And in fact, it's not. Yes, you can have negative selfishness. I'll take everything and keep it myself. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about fulfilling one's own needs I mean, I know a guy who I've known all my life. He's an incredible artist, and he's rejected it all his life, and he's now just an arse. Because he's like, you should have followed your heart, I think, but he wanted to follow the money, and it's made him a very angry person.
Yep.
Now that's quite an extreme example, and following your heart isn't an easy path.
No.
It's a really difficult life to choose. But if you don't have a choice, I suppose we all have a choice, but if you make that choice to follow what you want to do, that's the payoff, I suppose.
Yeah. The difference being the payoff may be a long way away.
Yeah.
And we don't seem very programmed to accept that some payoffs take 10, 15, 20 years these days.
But it's not a financial payoff.
No, exactly.
You know, my kids are like, Dad, why are you broke all the time? I mean, we're not broke. We have a really nice life. We have a lovely life. We don't make a lot of money.
But it's a freedom that you get as well from...
Well, there is a freedom. You know, I come in today and I knew you guys were coming and I'm like, I'm just going to make this knife. You know, I'm not going to sell it. I'm prepping up for something, so that's fine. It is sort of part of the business model. But it's more like, I just want to make this thing. And that's why I want to not be controlled by the business. Our first conversation we had is I want to be able to come in and go, I want to make this. To indulge the creativity, to indulge my selfishness or my desires or whatever. You know, last month I just made 6 axes. I'm not going to make any more. I might make some more in a couple of weeks' time. But that scratched that itch for me. And I'll spend a week doing something else, or I might make some bowls, or what. And this is what I want. It's a very difficult business model to have as a company.
Yeah.
And what I've come to the understanding is the business model I've created is wrong.
Okay.
It doesn't work because we don't make enough profit to sustain employees. Most of it goes on tax and rent.
Yeah.
So we're screwed by the tax man. You know, and I think you have to come to the realization that it's not the right business model to make a bit of garden tools and some chef's knives and some pans and teach a bit and then blah, blah, blah. It's great fun and it's great for creativity, but to have a company that's based on that is really difficult.
You seem very okay with that.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I think I am okay with it.
Yeah.
You're not earning to make millions anyway, I suppose.
No, and the reason for moving here was to increase the business, to build it up, to have, 6 people making pans and to make £1 million a year or 2 million quid a year, and then, kind of slightly take a step back and have a more managerial role. It's not really what I wanted to do.
So was that a vision at one point?
That was the reason we moved to this building, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
How long did it take you to realise that wasn't what you thought it was?
Well, pretty quickly, as 3 of the guys that worked for me screwed me, so...
Right.
Well, that doesn't help.
Pretty quickly after moving.
Yeah.
So, they screwed me and set up a rival business down the road behind my back.
Nice.
So nice, but I don't need to talk about that. So I think I've kind of battled with it for a couple of years and thinking, sometimes you chase dreams that aren't yours, if that makes sense. Sometimes you chase ideas that you think. Now, it could have worked maybe if I'd had a good business partner or some investors or something like that.
Yeah.
And that would, through economics and personality and timing, probably didn't work. And also you get to think, well, do we want to be a factory?
Yeah.
Or do we want to be a group of craftspeople trying to make a living, trying to be creative, trying to earn some money? We're in a business, we need to earn money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, it probably took me about 2 years to work it out and quite a lot of heartache. But this year is very different. So January, I don't employ anyone anymore. The guys who work for me are self-employed. And they work part-time and they can control their own hours.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm trying to help them set up their own businesses independently so that they can have their own creativity.
Yep.
My name is above the door. You work for... And that can be difficult for other creative people.
Yeah.
And how have you found it with AIM? How have you found it being able to...
You're basically supporting them, aren't you?
Yeah, I suppose it's twofold, isn't it? Because you are supporting them, your name's above the door, you're taking all the risk. But is there also some pride in passing that on to them?
Yeah.
Because they're then able to, this isn't a lineage thing for you, it doesn't seem. This, like, the tools are the lineage, they are the legacy. Maybe the kids want to take it up in years to come, whatever that looks like, but you are still able to pass that on in a way that for a long time no one was there to pass it on to you. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think initially I wanted to pass the business on to the people who work for me.
Yeah.
But I don't think they want to buy a business that has someone else's name on it. Now, whether that's an industry thing, whether that's a culture, like a modern way of thinking. I think maybe in the past people joined companies, they had longer careers, they would stay with them for longer, they would try and move up through a system, through a career, and then maybe take over. That I don't think happens very much anymore. I think people it's too easy to set up a business. You can set up a business.
It's really easy, yeah. You can set up a business at home in a couple of hours for about,
It's easy enough for it to
20
fail.
quid.
Yeah, exactly. So, and there's too much choice.
Yep.
So it's a very different world. And I think of course I'd like to have passed it on, but
you kind of are passing it on though. You might not be passing on Alex Pole, but you are passing on Alex Pole.
Yeah, I think the shift is to pass it on to allow someone else to have their own thing.
Yeah.
Now, teaching for me is a massive responsibility. I took a year out of teaching because I was just burnt out a bit and I wanted to reorganise this place. And you find, well, someone's taught me, I need to teach someone else. We need to pass on all this information, okay? Someone's taught the person that taught me. Someone's taught... And we can go back 5,000 years.
Yep.
If someone was clever enough, we could probably write a family tree from me to some guy a couple of thousand years ago.
Yep.
And that's just what Frederick talks about, my friend in Sweden, that he's like, and at the end of the course, he's saying, we are all in a chain now. We are all linked. And that was the most profound thing. No one through my education or through art college or all the other blacksmiths had said, look, I've taught you something. This means we are joint, we are linked. So all the people who've come through here, I have a link to. And they have a link to the other people that they teach. And it's not something that's very much spoken about because I think it's a bit, maybe it's a bit emotional or a bit kind of esoteric or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's true. And that did have quite a profound effect on me. So, yeah, the way of teaching and showing people what we do, it gives them an insight into the life that we lead as blacksmiths, as craftspeople. It gives them a great sense of pleasure. And it terrifies most people.
Yeah.
When they come. I mean, the last class I had, the guys, they were so nervous. These are like blokes in their 60s or 50s who were really successful or amazing at what they do. One of them was like shaking. I was like, wait, don't be so nervous, Because it was a new experience. And then also at the end of the day, they go, it's quite hard work doing this stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. How have you done this for X years?
Yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with self-confidence as well, because even when I do something new for the first time, I'm like, you get a bit like,
yeah,
I'm not going to be good at this. I'm good at what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And you kind of open up to that sort of, kind of a bit... raw here, like I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes, and it brings up a lot of emotion for people. You guys know that I go and teach up in Norway at this hotel, and that I've had marriage counselling sessions. The guy like goes, I really want to divorce my husband. I'm just like, all right, I'm not sure I should be a people person. So, people crying at the end of classes, people really kind of in it. And I think that's a wonderful thing about making. And we were talking, you said about Sam and his past and my past and about making as therapy.
Yep.
It gives confidence, but it also, when you've spent an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours focusing absolutely on one object, what your brain starts to do is sift through stuff that you are constantly blocking out. And people can start to process various things through, a practical thing. It could be gardening, it could be all sorts of different things. They call it mindfulness nowadays, which is such an arse expression.
It was
because
flow state
blacksmithing
for a
is about as
while
unmindful as you could ever think of, because you have to think of the next step all the time, so you're not really present. But yeah, I think the nervousness, the excitement, the learning new stuff, the concentration brings up a lot of emotion for a lot of people.
It does. And you're absolutely knackered by the end of it, 'cause you're just like, whoa, that was a lot. That was intense.
Yeah, and human beings are basically designed to work hard, not have that much downtime. Downtime, because we think too much.
Yeah.
Yes, so true.
So what is it? Idle hands are the devil's work.
With the rise of social media and entertainment comes a rise of, mental health issues, what people call, which is just brains working.
Yeah.
So I think that's, and that's why teaching is very popular as well. People want to come and do something that's very, very different.
That's the thing, very different. They want access to something that they have no access to. I have never been interested in horses whatsoever. I've found a load of Instagram accounts that offer like, come and work our ranch in Kazakhstan for a week, and I'm like, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Zero interest in horses, sat down with a couple of saddle makers, that's as close as I've ever got. I don't think I've ever laid my hand on a horse. And all of a sudden I'm like, that looks different. Yeah. I want to do that.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And it's just this, and that's the good thing about social media, right? It opens your eyes to all these things that are available.
Yeah.
That's a real positive of it. Yeah. The downside can be they all still feel super out of reach until people like yourself are like, oh no, you can come and do this.
You can do that.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
And we often, see ourselves as like a counter. I'm not afraid of technology. I run the whole business from my phone.
Yeah.
I mean, I go walking quite a lot, and I use the compass. I use an app, an OS map app. I mean, the technology is amazing.
Yeah.
In a sense, we almost don't use it enough. But to get lost in it is the issue, and then we often see ourselves with the teaching, especially as like a counterpoint. We're not Luddites. We just offer a balance.
Yeah.
Spend all your time on your phone, it's fine. But here's other thing. We have the same approach with our kids. The arguments happen with their devices. When they won't do other things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do your gaming, it's fine. Look at TikTok, I don't care. But you have to do other stuff as well as.
Yeah.
Balance, isn't it?
A balance, yeah. So that's how I approach the teaching here. It's not about trying to make people into blacksmiths. It's about giving them an experience and a balance to their everyday life.
Yeah, because not everyone wants to become a blacksmith, but they want to try something with their hands.
Not after a day in here, they don't.
Yeah. And realise how difficult these things are to make, because you can watch an artist or a maker do something, you're just like, that looks easy. And then you try to do it and you're like, okay, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I also have a theory I'm working on. I'll probably write something about it at some point. It's intentionality. And I think that's one of the big things, like you say there, you use your maps, you use your OS. That's a very intentional thing to do when you're out walking. Technology is fantastic for that. I'm not going to say I'm some sort of saint because I sit and doom scroll all the time. That's not an intentional use of technology. And I think making is really, really good for that, because if you're making a thing, like every hammer blow for you is an intentional movement of material. That's something I think people are really lacking, is intentionality in what they do. And I'd be really interested to see a real good study on that, and how, every move you've made to make this work has clearly been a very intentional move. I mean, I'm sure every maker will say things happen by accident or it was luck, but it's not, it's intention, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it there is a kind of vague plan.
Yeah.
It's not really a plan, but yes, you make a decision. To do that, and not all the decisions are right, but if it's pushing you in the right direction, then that's okay. I mean, some of them push you back a bit, but even a wrong decision is intentional. Yeah. As long as you're making decisions to try and do things. My approach is sort of constant, I'm constantly trying to reinvent myself, but not to be different, but to try and kind of. It's like making a recipe, it's like making a dish. You're creating a dish, you don't have a recipe to follow. So you constantly kind of, trying it over and over and over again to try and get that perfect combination.
It's iterative, isn't it? It's an iterative process. You're just constant iteration after iteration after iteration.
Yeah, and we evolve and we change as people. And as I'm in my 50s now, and I definitely do feel different than when I was in my 40s. Yeah. And I want different things. I don't want to be slaving in here 70 hours a week. That's what I used to do. For years. And my wife's gone, just get out, you've gone too weird, get out of the workshop. You know, I would do on average probably 60 hours a week on my own in my old workshop, you know, before I started employing people. And I didn't really mind, but you can get quite insular.
Yeah.
But for me, when I'm making, it all disappears, nothing. So why I don't really make axes very often, because the whole business just goes to shit, because I don't care about it. And I think fundamentally, I don't really care about making money. That is the biggest problem. So I'll never have a business partner, because like, you don't want to make, you know, the making is what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
And we have to make a business. So that's when it becomes, that's the difficult bit, I think, in a way.
To keep it going, you have to make money.
Yeah.
Well, you have to make money.
You know?
You can't deny that you don't.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no business. Otherwise, it's just a hobby. And I think that's an interesting point as well. So there's a lot of hobbyists.
And that's fine, it can be a hobby, but...
It can be a hobby. There's a lot of hobbyists presenting themselves as professionals.
Yes.
Social media is quite good for that. You know, and it's a tricky area. And I think if people have kind of, you know, if you've got a fully paid job during the week, and then you're a blacksmith at the weekend, and your Instagram is just about all the amazing stuff you make as a blacksmith, it's not necessarily...
Transparent, maybe.
It's not as transparent as because... Yeah. Oh, that's a difficult area.
It is.
It's tricky.
It is a difficult area, but I think one thing that I would personally like to rail hard on is I don't think it's wrong to do that, because it's absolutely right to do that. Everyone should start somewhere. Maybe you do want it to be a full-time thing. All that's well and good. Where I think the problem is when people don't rely on it in their main income, they don't price things as if it was their main income.
Yeah,
which
that's
then costs people like you, where it is your main income, real problems. Because if you're going to a craft show and you see, you know, 3 stands with knives on them, and there's yours, there's Sam's, and there's some other hobbyists there, you could all make lovely knives. Granted, they're not going to have the time in it, so they're not going to be as good a knife, but they could be selling it for the price of material because they don't have to put time into it.
That's
They're just keeping the hobby afloat.
Yeah.
And I think that is detrimental to the overall makers community.
Yeah.
Is the harsh and honest truth. And I don't want that to put anybody off of being a hobbyist, because I think everyone should try it. But I think you should price it as if it was your main job if you're going to sell it.
I suppose the flip side to that is if you've got 3 people, then people will migrate to somebody's, and then that's where reputation comes into it. So
True.
Yes, it is. It's an interesting balance. I suppose fundamentally, as long as people are making things and enjoying it, maybe it doesn't matter that much one way or another. I mean, we don't feel I don't feel in competition to other people. We get copied a lot. So, you know, one of our biggest sellers was the coffee scoop, the stainless steel and copper coffee scoop we used to make. Don't make those anymore. There's so many now being produced, whether they're copied from us or whether it's just a fashion thing. So you sort of have to keep on moving on. But yeah, I think fundamentally, as long as people are making things and enjoying it, you know, if someone's selling a knife much cheaper than ours,
You've got your customers at that point, haven't you?
it doesn't really matter. I think, you know, as long as they're being honest about how it's made, where it's made. Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter whether they're a hobbyist or not, but I think, you know, there are some companies selling stuff as like British-made knives, and we know full well they're imported from overseas.
That's a problem.
You know, so that's much more of a problem than some.
The handmade thing's a problem in the same guise. Yeah. I think the ruling is if there's 14% of it that have been touched by human hands, you can call it handmade. Which is just a total cop-out of a rule, right? Yeah. Complete cop-out.
I mean, that's silly. But yeah, and you know, with this sort of copying thing, you just have to keep on moving forward. So lots of products I've stopped making now.
Right.
Partly because we want to keep moving forward, but also lots of other people are making them.
Yeah.
Right, interesting.
Not necessarily copying me, but there's a sort of, there are trends and fashions.
Yeah, of course.
That kind of thing. And you think, well, we want to be ahead of the fashion.
So that's an active choice to...
That's an active, everything that goes on the website, everything that we make is an active choice always about what we produce and when we produce it. That's a strategy, yeah. It's not a fixed strategy.
No.
But I'm constantly looking and seeing and checking and asking myself what I want to make, asking the guys, are we bored of making this? You know, we have the sort of 80-20 rule that if a product becomes, if it's more than 20, so in any job, you get like 80% enjoyment, and there's always at least 20% of shit that you don't want to do. If that balance is unbalanced, we stop making the products.
That's really interesting.
That's a really nice rule.
Yeah, I like that.
So the most successful, profitable products, I probably don't make anymore because they became
Laborious,
or sometimes they're technically very complicated to make, and we've made them for a while. And actually, when you look at I love an Excel spreadsheet. I spent a week pricing every single item. So when we price things, you know, it's got 2 rivets. Well, I know exactly how much every rivet costs.
Yeah.
And we have a formula that ends up, that's why our things cost how they cost. And actually, when you do that, and some products, you think, oh, we're selling loads of these. Yeah, but you actually find you're not making any money off them at all.
Yeah.
That's a really important thing for other people to hear. Because if you're not making any money, you can't keep making them if it's costing you.
What do they supermarkets call them? They call them loss leaders. You know, knives for us is a loss leader because we don't really make any money off knives, but we love making them.
Yeah, right.
You know, axes you don't make a great deal of money off because they're so labour intensive. So there are some things that are kind of hero products. It's kudos. As long as you're making some money off it, it's fine. But I did.
As long as it's not costing you, right?
As long as it's not costing you. And actually, some products I found we were losing money by making them. They're very popular. I can't remember quite what it was. We were making obviously lots of them, and when you broke it down into the cost, it was like we were just not making any money on those. So, and unless they're a real hero product, there's no point in making them.
Yeah,
so there is quite a lot of business development goes on. I mean, I do spend quite a lot of time on the computer looking at the business or the products themselves and pricing. That I'm really good at. I break things down into absolutes. So each product has about 20 or 30 different categories. They don't fulfill all of them, but you know, we've got like 20 different lines of what we've got to fill in, and then at the end of it there's a number, and then you choose how much profit you want to make.
That's one, really important for people to hear, but there's a greater level of importance because earlier on you said how much you struggled with numbers and with dyslexia, but you've also just said you love an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, because you can put in formulas and it does it all for
you.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is what I like about the technology, you know. I'm terrible at maths, but my phone has a calculator on it. Yeah. It's brilliant. I mean, I literally cannot add up 2 sets of numbers, but I can, you know, if you write it down, or if you're putting, okay, this steel, I mean, steel comes in 3 meter lengths of stainless, and I can work out how much each product, how much material it takes to make a single product. And so you can divide that by that. Actually, that's very simple. I couldn't do it in my head. Yeah,
but you can do it on a spreadsheet.
We can do it on a spreadsheet, and then all the numbers are there. I suppose almost a spreadsheet's like a kind of puzzle. It's kind of right in front. It's very visual, and you can change things
quickly,
around quite easily.
Yeah.
And at the end, it's doing all the adding for you. So that's quite. John next door, my friend who's got a business next door, he set up the spreadsheet for me.
Nice.
And he said, "Well, you just put this." He loves an Excel as well.
I love an Excel spreadsheet.
And you can see I think it's like creating pictures. You can see a kind of. Yeah, like an overall picture. And these products are very profitable. Okay, well, let's try and push those. These ones we love making. Let's do that. We love making these. Okay, they don't make so much money. Whatever. These ones, they're a bit of a bore, but they've loads of profit.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So it's always constantly kind of shifting around.
And those are the products that can be the 20% to keep the lights on and keep the rent paid and keep the...
Yeah, basically. Yeah, and then an individual product, sometimes they become really laborious to make or physically quite stressful or whatever. And I think, you know, at a certain point sometimes because we're not going to make those anymore. Yeah. Or you find a new way of making them, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's constantly evolving.
How important is all of that as a maker to do that stuff?
I would say to other people, fundamentally, you should be spending probably 1 day a week looking at what things cost. I mean, it depends on your type of business, I suppose. I think the nature of a maker is that I'm not interested in it really. I mean, I am interested in a kind of abstract sense. I like doing the business side of it because then you can think, well, actually, this makes profit, and if I've got profit, I can then go and do the things that I want to do. Yes. So that's the sort of balance, I suppose. Yeah. I think a lot of people are scared of it. I think they feel that it's, this is another thing I learned, learned in Sweden from Frederick. He's like, don't be embarrassed to make money. Yeah. Don't,
How important is that?
Swedes in Sweden, they're like, you're a craftsman, we're going to elevate you in our social standing. In Britain, you're a craftsman, yeah, we think we'll push you down a bit. You're not as important. There's this kind of slightly subliminal attitude. Maybe craft is a bit of a hobby, or
I'm not sure it's that subliminal anymore.
No, I don't think it's that subliminal.
I think it's pretty.
Never be ashamed to be proud of what you do. Never be ashamed to make money from it.
Yep.
Never be ashamed to make a decent living from it. People are basically jealous. Mm-hmm. My wife is constantly annoyed with me with the fact that I really love going to work. That's very tongue-in-cheek, but we always said we were the Monday morning crew. I love coming to work. Maybe a bit less now because I'm getting older, but you know what I mean? I still get an excitement about coming in and making things. Yeah. And that's what you should. So you need to understand the nature of your business to make money, to survive, to do that.
To enjoy the Mondays, which goes back to the selfish making, doesn't it? I want to enjoy every day at work, so this needs to work as a business. Yeah,
and I think other makers, and a lot of them are very good at it, and I think things have changed quite a lot. There's good accounting systems, and there's a lot more help. Yeah. And I think there's, but I think there is a sort of slight, maybe it's a British thing, a slight embarrassment about making money from things that you've made. Yep. It's not real money.
Yeah, I've never really understood that one.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing because in our, go to Japan, right? You still have national heroes, craftspeople.
Yeah, living national heroes, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And they're revered.
Living national treasure, that's
national
what it
treasures, that's it. They're revered and respected, and that's how it used to be. Yep. But I think post-industrial revolution probably, if you're shifting numbers around the world and making huge amounts of profit, you get a lot of respect for that, Yeah. And I don't want to be derogatory about anyone, but there is this sort of slight feeling that, right, you're really enjoying going to work, you're really enjoying your job, and you're making money from it? No, that can't be right, can it?
Yeah.
You have to be hating making money.
You have to hate it. Yeah. But also, on the flip side of that, there's the kind of slightly self-indulgent, suffering artist kind of thing. And I've shaken that off years ago. I mean, I was never a party to it anyway. It's like, be fucking proud. Don't suffer inside. Don't suffer for your art. I mean, I think that's a ridiculous thing to do.
The starving artist thing's just silly.
It's just not. So if you want to make something, understand, if you want to make it as a business, be proud of it, understand what you're doing, like look through your workshop and understand. I'm sort of vaguely teaching the guys here, one of them, about the business. I was kind of mentoring him loosely. And he's like, why are you obsessed about turning the lights off? And I'm like, well, because that's costing us money. Do you understand how much throwing grinding belts away is? Do you understand how much leaving gas tanks? Not that he does these things. I'm just saying just an example. Do you understand how much we spend a month on coffee? Do you know how? And he's like, no, I haven't got the faintest idea. Because you're being employed, no one, I really care. I take my money home and that is fine.
The PAYE life.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't that be nice? So if you understand all these little things, then, the margins are very tight. But if you can save 10% at one end, then you can try and make another 10% at the other end. That does make quite a big difference.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah, and all those to get that 10%, that could be 1% here, 2% there, 4% there.
It doesn't have to be a slash in someone's wages, or it doesn't have to be this. You can just, and it's not about being tight, it's just about trying to keep control of things.
It's sensible, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Which I'm not always very good at, because often I order kind of like batches of steel, you know. I think, oh yeah, we'll use 100 of those, and then we never end up doing. So I'm not. It's not perfect. Theory.
As long as you've saved money on the coffee and the
lifestyle. Well, actually, then you just turn them into something else. But you know, scrap is an interesting thing. So that, you know, we have about 6 different buckets of. So the steel comes in 3 meter lengths or 4 meter lengths, whatever, and then we make products, and then the offcuts are all saved, and then we make other products from those offcuts, and then they go down, and then we basically end up with buckets of pieces of steel that are about that big, and we try and use all
as
of
much as you can.
Because what a lot of people don't understand is, you know, I can turn that into that's like 10 pence worth of material, but I can sell it for £30.
Yeah.
If I've turned it into something.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of mentality we try and keep, you know.
Use everything.
And a lot of that goes down to you are moving material around. It's not reductive. You can constantly just make from it. That's what I found really interesting about Sam. Sam clearly delineates himself from a knife maker to a bladesmith, because he feels his view is that a knife maker is the grinding, the cut into shape. A bladesmith is actually doing the smithing. And it's like you saying a metalsmith. It's the moving of material, isn't it?
Yeah.
So earlier you talked about, you know, doing 70, 80 hour weeks and stuff. What's your view on hustle culture? And there seems to be a push against it at the moment.
On what? On
hustle culture.
I don't even know what that is.
People are like railing against working long hours and working really hard online. There's a whole side of the internet that's railing against hustle culture. Yeah.
Well, so they reckon they should be working less and getting paid more. Yeah, I frankly, I think it's bollocks.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
I think it's a really dangerous. Like most things in life, it's quite complicated. I think there's a benefit to it. I mean, you know, maybe it's an age thing. So you've got to get the balance right. I think if you want to work 3 days a week, work 3 days a week.
Yeah.
But don't come to me on day 4 and go, I haven't got any money. All right? Or I can't afford to pay my rent. Or I'm going to work 3 days a week, but I'm going to charge you an exorbitant amount. It's not going to work. Like, you will get what you work for.
Yeah, okay.
You know, that's the kind of attitude that we have. If you work, it's not necessarily about working hard and driving yourself into the ground, but it is about understanding that you don't get something for nothing. Okay, if you want to be trading shares, for instance, or the stock exchange, whatever, or cryptocurrency, and you're really good at it, and you make enough money from one day on your computer, and you can take 6 days off, well, that's great. Embrace it.
Yeah.
We have had in the past here, people only want to work 4 days a week, but at the end of the month, they're like, I don't have any money, I can't afford to work here anymore. And it's like, well, I'll give you 5 days. No, but I need a me day.
That's what Saturday and Sunday's for.
Well, that's what Sunday's for.
Yeah. Traditionally, that's what Sunday's for.
Yeah, and traditionally, people worked 6 days a week, mostly. And I don't think driving yourself into the ground is sensible, no, but especially in a very physical job, if you're sensible on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, you're still fit on Thursday and you're starting to wind down on Friday.
Yep.
You can work a bit on Saturday as well, but don't go hell for leather Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So some of the guys in the past have said, right, I want to do like long 10-hour days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so I can have 2 days off in the week. And I'm like, that's not going to work.
You're going to be
because you're
battered by. That's a lot.
If you only want to work 3 days a week and your financial circumstances can deal with that, then that's fine.
Yeah.
I happen to like working. I mean,
But that's the other thing, isn't it? You're building a business that you enjoy working in, so why would you not want to work in it more? And at that point, does it become a hustle, or is it actually just that as your lifestyle? Because a lot of this making is about building a lifestyle, isn't it? Yeah. It's not about building, we've talked a lot about business or craft. It's not about building a craft. It's not about building a business. It's one big thing.
Yeah, the lifestyle business is an interesting, I was talking to someone the other day, they were like, yeah, we've got a lifestyle business, but my lifestyle's shit. So let's do something about it. But yeah, it's trying to find the balance. And if you can get your work, your finance, your family life all to align, well, brilliant, because it doesn't often happen, because something's always going on. But if you're sort of trying, I mean, I like working 5 days a week. I think probably, I don't know, last 2 or 3 years, I don't really work weekends anymore. I used to do like 14 weeks straight without stopping. You can't ask people to do that anymore. I would work 5 days a week and teach at the weekends or do a festival. Yep. Now, I teach on my own now because previously, in the past, if I've asked someone to assist me, they want 2 days off. So then suddenly you've got a production issue of Monday and Tuesday because they've worked Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that doesn't work if you're trying to run a production business. We're production smiths. That's what we are. That's the whole nature. So I will work 5 days and then teach. But now I just teach much smaller classes. Some days I take Monday off, some days I just come in and work another 5 days. Mm-hmm. But I suppose it's different for me because I'm the sort of boss and I can kind of...
Your name above the door, isn't it?
I can sort of do what I want, not in a bad way, but if you're trying to regulate your production, it's quite difficult if people are not... And also if they only want to work 3 days a week, you're only getting 3 days of production as opposed to 5, makes things a bit slower. So there's somewhere, I think somewhere there's got to be a balance in between. I don't think people working themselves to the bone is particularly sensible, but also I don't like the attitude of the entitlement of we need more time for ourselves. And you go, well, what did you do on your days off? You're like, well, I don't know, just sort of...
Netflix.
Yeah. I love Netflix, but there's nothing wrong with it, but it's like, if you're doing something productive, well, get another job, get 2 jobs. Yeah.
I often, you talk about the 3-4 days, and I often think when people talk about the amount of work they do to Bert, maybe our second or third podcast, Bert the Potter, does lovely earthware, in many ways similar to what Florian's doing. He's a very good potter, but nowhere near as well known, I don't think, personally. I mean, he's pretty well known, but when he started being a potter, he basically built his life around, where am I going to live? Where's my studio going to be? How am I going to build? He built his life to this is how much I think I can make as a potter in my first couple of years. I still want to work round the clock. I don't want to feel skint. So I'm going to make all these lifestyle choices so that I can experiment as a potter. And I thought that was really insightful for him at maybe 18, he made that choice, 18, 20. Yeah. Versus being like, I'm just skint all the time. Because that puts a lot of people off the craft, feeling like they're skint all the time, because it does take a long time to build it up. Yeah. We talked earlier whether some of your guys take on the business or whether they go and build their own thing. Even if you teach them everything you know and they go and do their own thing, they're still starting from ground zero. Yeah. And that's hard.
But in a way, they're not starting quite from ground zero. They're probably starting from floor 3 or 4. We started from ground zero because no one taught us.
Very true.
So actually what I'm trying to do is give them a bit of a head start so they can come in and rent the workshop for, frankly, next to nothing. Yep. They bring in their own materials, they bring in their own gas and belts, and so I charge them just enough to cover the electricity, basically, and to cover the cost of the building, which is quite a lot. And that should give them a little bit of a leg up. I started with nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that a responsibility? Is that a responsibility you felt to offer that?
Well, to a degree, it was sort of slightly negotiated. They didn't want to pay very much to rent the workshop. I felt, well, if you're going to use it and benefit from it, then why not? And we're just coming to the end of our 3-month trial, and we'll see. We'll probably do 4 months trial and see how it goes.
What would your opinion have been if someone had offered you that from the start?
I would have bitten their bloody hand off.
Yeah, quite.
I mean, I may have. It's difficult to put yourself back, I suppose, in a way. I mean, I say that now. But when I left art college, we were kind of a bit loose, really. We weren't really very settled. I mean, we set up a forge wherever we were. Me and my mate Rob, we lived in the middle of Dartmoor in a house, no electricity. First set of gates I built was on a hand pump bellows using wood.
Nice.
Didn't even have any coal.
Nice.
It was like that was a lot
of hard work. Yeah.
If someone had offered us a workshop, yeah. I mean, the positive side of me thinks I would have taken the opportunity. The kind of more maverick side of me probably thinks I would have told them to fuck off. I'd do it my own way. Yeah. But we weren't as settled.
Yeah.
We were quite transient. I wasn't a traveller, but I was always moving around.
Yeah.
And I just sort of set up. Yeah, someone did offer me a workspace, and it was quite cheap, and they helped me out, and that was brilliant. And someone would give you some tools, or they'd loan you stuff, and then you just sort of start building it up on your own. But it is a very different world. I know everyone always says that, but it was a lot less connected. Mm-hmm. I only met one blacksmith because I was we spend all the time in the pub, and you'd speak to a guy and he goes, he's looking for a bit of work, so you go and work for him for a bit. And then he'll be like, well, that person wants a little bit of work, so you go and work for them. Or this shed is free for a month, do you want to set up in there? Or whatever, it's just quite different.
Yeah. It seems like quite a lot of kit to just set up. Just like, do you want to set up there? Is it just a case of needs must at that point? Like, you knew you wanted to do this, right? So,
well, also, yeah, I suppose they're lucky to a certain degree, or people are quite lucky nowadays because there's more machinery around, for a start. I didn't have a power hammer for 20 years. I hand forged everything. No presses. It was literally, and I had a welder. First workshop down here was at Cricket St Thomas, which is the old wildlife park near here. And I borrowed some money to buy a welder. I had an anvil that I had liberated from art college, which they were quite happy about. And I'd got a hammer, one blacksmithing hammer at art college they'd given me, and a few other basic tools and my jewellery equipment. And I bought a load of steel and built all the workbenches and everything there. And then there was a coal forge, and I just spent months just making bits. You don't need anything.
Yeah.
Everything can be made by hand. You don't actually need any of this machinery.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm spoiled, and I have been able to afford to buy. I mean, sometimes you have to buy equipment to do a particular job.
Yep.
So I've been lucky, but that's like 20 years worth of equipment. Most of it's come in the last 10 years.
Do you see many people setting up and just going straight for a power hammer, straight for this, straight for that?
Because you feel like you need it.
Yeah,
I was the same.
Yeah. When you've done your CNC furniture, you wanted everything in-house, and we were in a good position to be able to do that. But certainly with blacksmithing, I feel that you could really limit your learning by just going straight for a power hammer. I
think so. I mean, it depends on your circumstances. I think there's a lot of people who are just in a shed and they've got a little gas forge that they've bought or got one off eBay or made one, and an anvil, and they're tinkering away. And I think that's a good way to learn, is the hammer skills. But I think some people are, I'm going to set up a new business, I'll buy all the kit. But it's personal, it's different circumstances, and it does make life a lot easier.
Yeah.
But is there fundamental things that you think you learn quicker because you're doing it by hand?
I think you understand the material more. So I had a guy work for me, and when he first came, in fact, I used to do this to some of them, is they would make 100 nails, and then...
That's like an old blacksmith traditional thing, isn't it? Make your first 100 nails.
You'd chuck 98 of them away because they were shit. And then I would just make another 100, and then another 100, and then another 100. And by doing that, he actually came back, and then we used to make nails quite often and other stuff. He's like, you become a much better knife maker by understanding the basics. So it's about understanding the material.
Right.
So I think doing the principle of all of that is, understanding the traditional techniques, or at least a few of them, fundamentally with quite basic materials, just like mild steel or whatever, will make you a better knife maker or a better axe maker or a better craftsman in general. To understand, I think a lot of people skip the basics. That's sort of what I'm trying to say. So a traditional apprenticeship is 7 years for a reason, right? So the career of the blacksmith goes from apprenticeship to what's called a journeyman and then to master. 7 years an apprentice. So by the time you've done 7 years worth of study, you understand your material. Then you can start exploring the kind of artistic or the design or the creative side of things. Predominantly journeymans were sort of around 3 to 20 years before you became a master. And then when you become a master, well, then you are a master and you sort of pay back and you give the information back to people. So I think it's, you know, it's about understanding the fundamentals of the material. A lot of people just go, I want to be a knife maker. I know amazing knife makers don't know how to make fucking nails.
Right.
Like, surely you should understand the basics before you can go off-piste.
Yeah, it's an interesting argument though, isn't it? Because the counter-argument in modern society would be, but well, if you're doing that one thing constantly, you'll get really good at that one thing. But if you don't have the underlying knowledge to do that one thing constantly, you'll constantly have the same imperfections. Yeah. Is the argument.
I mean, at art college so I'm lucky, when I was studying jewellery, it was all technique based, and then you could go on to design. When I did my architectural metalwork, it was all design.
Right.
And then they would teach you how to make your design. Yeah. So I was lucky to have both views. I think you need a combination of both. I understand the apprenticeship system. I would sway probably more to that now as I've got older. Before, I'd be like, nah, just make what you want, that's fine. But actually, as my career's progressed, I think people should be doing apprenticeships. I think a lot of the issue, what did you call it? The hustle culture. Hustle culture. I think a bit of that is people don't want to do the hard graft. Yeah. I think they don't want to do the basics. They want to leapfrog. Yep. They aren't willing to put in that groundwork. And I can say that because I wasn't willing to put in that groundwork when I was, I mean, this is, you know, it's like looking back at a completely different person. I mean, when I came out of art college, I thought I was the bollocks. I thought I could do everything. I soon learned that I was shit. I went to go and work for the world master, and within like 3 days, he was like, it's nice to have you around, mate, but you don't know. I mean, I'm still friends with Jim all these years later, but you realise you don't know anything. So I think, you know, we have a lot of people coming from Hereford, the blacksmithing college. Yep. They're not really geared to work for other people. They're sort of taught how to run, they're not even really taught how to run their own business. They're sort of thrown to the wolves to a certain degree. And I think they should be teaching,
Our degree was the same.
Yeah, teaching more, or go, okay, you've got your basics, now you need to have, there should be more work placements, more apprenticeship schemes.
Agree.
I can't afford to take on an apprentice, because I have to pay someone to just make shit for me all day long, much as I'd love to. We've got some interns coming, and you have to pay people quite a lot. It's quite a lot of tax.
A lot of tax and
it's quite difficult to take on someone who doesn't know almost anything, and it's sad in a way. We would like to be able to, but
support's just not there.
Yeah, support's just not there.
The two different mediums that you talked about is interesting, you know, jewellery and the architecture. So I employed a bunch of design engineers to work for me. I personally, my main job is mechanical design engineer. I studied product design first. Kate publishes a magazine. Kate studied product design first, then was a furniture maker. We don't have any education on how to be publishers. That's why we do it our way. But we understand product, tactile, real things, and we understand making. So we understand the output product quality, and we understand the context, which is what makes that the thing. And I think that, and it's the same, like I was saying, when I employed engineers, I would never look for engineers. I would look for mechanical designers, industrial designers or product designers, because they understood design thinking. Because you can learn engineering later because it's more binary.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you saying you learn technique, hardcore design, and then you put that together. And I think it's a really good message for a lot of people that want to try something different or try a craft, because you probably do have the skills. They're just not black and white, the exact same skills. They're muddled in there with other skills that you can pull.
Yeah, and also time. A lot of people don't have the time to spend. You know, a college course at Hereford is only 3 years.
Yeah. So less than half of what traditional apprentices.
And it's really difficult for the college. Hereford's an amazing place. I think they're constrained by the amount of time that they are allowed. You know, their courses should be much longer.
Yeah.
But also now with funding, can you spend 7 years studying?
Well, this is it.
And how much debt are you going to come out? You know, all these different kind of factors are going on. So I think technique is probably the most, it's difficult to, you need both.
Yeah,
you do need
You've got to have both. You can't have, you know, I would say techniques, it depends on what you want to do. So, I mean, my work is very untechnical. I mean, it's easy to make this stuff that I make.
Well, you say that, but that's you, isn't it?
But the skill is in the thought, is in the approach, is in the design.
Yeah.
Not that it's really designed.
Well, it is to some respect, isn't it?
It's sort of created. I mean, most of it comes from the process, and that's what
I suppose
I like.
That's it, isn't
that's
it?
why I like the process. So, and the process is mixed in with technique. So you've got a little bit of different things. I mean, I know I'm technically not a particularly good blacksmith on the kind of scale of things. I know guys that are so much more technical.
But they might also say the same about you.
Well, I don't know, maybe.
Because we've had this conversation multiple times with multiple makers where they're like, oh, all the stuff I do is easy. I'm like, no, I couldn't do it. You know, you just, what was it?
No, I was just going to say about Norway, we studied in Norway for a bit with the exchange from uni, and Jack made a set of axes on your time off, didn't you? You just wanted to try it.
Oh, did you?
And you sold
14,
them all,
I told myself I would do 14 axes.
Oh,
I think it's because we had 14 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll do 14 axes. And that wasn't one a day, that was I thought it'd be one a day. It was 13 days of fucking up, and then how many can you make in the last 2 days?
Yeah.
Because that's what it is, right?
Where was that?
That was in Lillestrøm, just outside Oslo.
Yeah.
They had amazing workshops, and that's where you really found furniture making, didn't you?
Yeah, because you just because obviously University at Edinburgh was like, here's a bit of blue foam, go and do
make
whatever.
a model.
Yeah, make a model. But actually in Norway, you can just get hands on, you can use the material, learn the machines and just get stuck in and make it, something that you can hold rather than just being, it's just an idea.
And the material reveals often what it wants.
Well, exactly,
you
understand
you can design things on paper, which is brilliant, which is great if that's what you want to do. But also, it's about understanding the material. And I think that's the core of everything.
Yeah.
All of this, it's like to understand how the material behaves. You can't understand it on paper. Mm-hmm. You can in theory.
Yeah.
But you've got to go in and make it. So that's kind of why I don't draw very much stuff. Yeah. Because you come up with an idea, you think, oh,
spend so long doing that.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And you go make it, or it's so complicated to make that you can't price it. I mean, someone asked me to make some ice tongs, like the nightmare of the ice tongs has been going on for months. Amazing chef in London wants some ice tongs, and I've been making them over and over and over again and redesigning it. And I made a pair. They're so complicated to make. I'm like, do you want to pay 150 quid for like a pair of ice tongs that big? And it's like, not really. It's just this sort of balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't understand that until you've tried it and made something in that material.
So is that something you'll often do? Like, I will just try this and then I will come back to you with the price. Yeah, seems sensible.
Yeah, mostly that's kind of, I mean, obviously through experience, if someone goes, I want a plate, it's going to be this much, or whatever, I can give them a basic idea, but often the price isn't, it's not finalised until I've gone and made one. And I make a lot of mistakes. Like those 100 plates there's a massive mistake. Because I didn't realise how, you make a 200ml plate, you go, it's going to take me a long time. But 300ml is obviously a lot more work.
Yeah.
It's not a little bit more work, the area is a lot more work.
It's a lot more work. And then I've also had to get new tooling made. And then I realised that they wouldn't go in the forge, so I've had to have a new forge built.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So just to get
And
the
then I
job
was
done, you're like, oh, okay.
Because I was trying to price it, and I mean, they've priced okay, but I was thinking, no, at least kind of 30% off where it should be.
Really?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it still makes money on it, and it's an amazing project. But you're still learning.
Yeah, of course.
Some things are easier and some things are more difficult.
And do these people come to you rather than you going to them now? Like, is that how it's been for a while? Like,
Yes, yeah. I don't approach any.
They'd come to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, it's good.
So I'm lucky. I have an agent who works between
Okay.
me and the restaurants.
Oh, great. Is that someone you sought out or someone that's sought out?
We've sort of met on Instagram.
Nice.
You know, it's the craft person's dating app.
A modern love story of a craftsman.
Love story. Matt, we were sort of mutually kind of whatever contacted through Instagram, and he's an agent for various different makers, specifically within the restaurant industry.
Interesting.
And he is approached, so he's got a whole network of restaurants that he works for, or someone will approach him and they say, we want a new service, or we want this product or that product. He will present glass or ceramics or steel
fabulous.
or whatever. And then so Matt works between the two of us. So I don't really have to deal with the restaurants as such,
Yeah.
Nice.
which is quite good.
But that makes it easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Something you would recommend to other makers?
Yeah, it's definitely worth looking into. Yeah, because he can fence a lot of problems, and that's his business.
He's kind of like selling it to them.
Yeah, he's selling it to them. I don't have to go to London. Sometimes he has 40, 50 meetings with the restaurant before anything happens.
Yeah.
But these are like the world's best. These are like top-end restaurants.
Yeah.
Me and my personality, I probably can go into a top-end restaurant and sell myself. A lot of people couldn't go to a 3-star restaurant and say, yeah, here, look, take this stuff. You know, that's what Matt does.
Yeah, right.
A lot of people don't feel comfortable in that environment.
Yeah.
He understands.
And don't have the contacts.
Don't have the contacts, don't have the confidence. He understands the industry really well. He also understands craftspeople.
Yeah.
So he understands, okay, we've got, actually the job I'm doing for the Japanese chef came independently, but he was also connected to Matt, my agent. A lot of people don't have the capacity to make 1,500 pieces of cutlery.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's just frank,
so Matt will go, well, this is great, but this guy can't do it because he can only make 10 or whatever. I don't know. So it's good. I mean, it comes at a cost.
Yeah, of course it does.
But
any good service should.
But then you get the job, sort of.
But then you get the job and the kudos and
More
the
time to
reputation.
Yeah.
And then if you've done jobs, we've done jobs for some of the top restaurant in the world. That gives you a presence. Other chefs see it. It gives you a credibility, and it goes on and on from there. So yeah, it's
interesting.
Nice. He's an amazingly nice guy. So
Yeah.
and he knows the industry much better than I do. So
Perfect match.
He'll also be, if he's dealing with a number of craftsmen and that level of customer, i.e. the restaurants, he's pitching it at the right price. And I'm sure that he knows what that price is, having spoken to you and spoken like.
Yeah, I set the prices.
Yeah.
So
but
I
he
basically
knows what to tell.
I mean, if the chef's going, I want that, and I only want it for £10, he's like, well, don't bother speaking to these guys. Cause
Yeah, absolutely. And people that are approaching him will know the clientele that he pulls.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good move. It's not something I've heard many makers do, is working with an agent.
No.
Which sort of came by accident, but it's worked out really well.
Because it is some makers were like, how does he get those? Like, how do you even get those opportunities? But, because some people seek them out and others come to them. It's just.
And also, I'm very brazen. I mean, I will see a restaurant sometime. I probably don't do it. I mean, not too much with restaurants, but I will do it with other people. In fact, before I had Matt as the agent, so he deals with almost all of the UK stuff. I'm not afraid to write to people and go, I want to work with you. So, that collaboration sometimes.
Yep. Yeah.
I think sometimes I'm not afraid to put myself out there.
Yeah.
Or see something and go, I really like that. Can we talk? Can we discuss a project or whatever? I'm not afraid to do that.
You can't be afraid, can you? Not in
a lot of people are. I think they're a little bit, and that's just kind of back to be proud of what you do. Be proud of who you are. Be. Not everyone has that amount of confidence, but it doesn't
definitely
do any.
Grown on me. definitely grown
Well,
on
the
me.
confidence.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah,
reaching out
unbelievable.
because I really believe in what we're doing, you
Yeah.
know. So, but before it was just like, oh, it's just this little thing that I'm doing that
Yeah.
I don't really know if it'll make any difference. But like now you have the confidence behind you, and this.
Yeah, and it sort of snowballs, I suppose, as well. And also, what's the word? It's a bit like kind of asking a girl out for a drink, or what's the worst that can happen?
They
Just
say no. Okay,
Yeah.
well, move on
Okay,
to move on.
it's less embarrassing than that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
I remember when I was a jeweller, I phoned up Paul Smith's office and got through to their buyer and said, "We make this amazing jewellery. Do you want to buy it?" And she's like, "Right, give me the website." And she looked and said, "Yeah, great. Come in for a meeting."
Really?
Off we went, and then we were Paul Smith's largest accessory account.
See, it just that's amazing.
Offshore.
Yeah.
For a short period of time. But see, I mean, it's pretty nerve-wracking, but you've got to have the.
But I bet you the next time you phoned another big design house, it was much less nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and it kind of gets a bit easier, you know. And this, you just give it a go, I suppose.
Yeah. And don't be scared of the failure rate, I suppose, is a big thing.
Yeah.
Like, a no's just a no. Like, it's not a personal attack on you.
Rejection's hard. It is hard. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it is difficult, and I think, especially for makers, because there's a lot of emotion.
Yeah, it's their work. It's like it feels like it's
Part of
attacking you, really.
Yeah, and I do understand that. But advice to other people is just give it a go. Sometimes phone someone up and go, "Can I work with you?"
Yeah.
Or "Can we collaborate?" Or "I've got an idea. What do you think about this?"
Yeah. Tell me about cookbooks. Or books in general. You've done a fair few of them now.
I've done two. Now, yeah, the original one was the cookbook, which is a kind of passion project. Yeah, don't self-publish a book ever.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
You're sitting around the right table for that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. No, that kind of came out of the festival scene that we were doing. So when we were doing a lot of festivals, there would be a lot of fire chefs or fire pits, fire cooking areas. And quite often, I mean, this is about being sort of brazen. I'd go out and just say, "Here, do you want to use this bit of kit? Or do you want to use that?" or whatever. And then, so I sat down. A friend of mine, I got introduced to Pooch, the co-author of the book, and she's a ghostwriter. She's a cookbook ghostwriter.
Right.
And I just pitched an idea to her and said, "Look, you know, if I send some stuff to these chefs, you know, can they give us some recipes?" So
That's such a good idea.
So I wrote to all the chefs myself and said, "If I give you these things," I didn't know some. I mean, some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. Most of them we'd worked with, some we hadn't. And I said, "Look, I'll send you 3 items. Can you make me 3 recipes based on the product, not the ingredients?" So the product is the starting point.
Interesting.
Not the ingredients. And that was the whole...
Some real subliminal marketing there, isn't it?
Yeah, well, basically that was the idea of it, is to show people how to use the things. So if I give you a frying pan, you know, that's where you start your recipe from.
I like that idea.
So that was cool. Didn't make very much money from that. It's expensive making books, as you understand.
Just paid our last print bill just there. Jeez, oh.
Yeah. And decided to go for there's a Welsh company that still use, I think it's called a Heidelberg, like full colour. It was like quite expensive printing.
Yeah.
But I've got a copy for you down there, actually.
Nice.
So it's great fun. It was just how to mix food and craft. You know, I'm really into this kind of, yes, we make stuff. We're food and drink based. What really is exciting is when someone uses it.
Yeah.
And that's about purpose. You know, I did a film shoot we're doing a collaboration with a company called Billy Tannery. They make goat leather.
We've featured them, yeah.
Yeah, so we're doing this collaboration.
They do some lovely stuff as well.
Yeah, and we've got this thing going on, and so we've been making this product, and we went to film it with a local chef down the road. And actually, it's constantly just one of those kind of lovely moments. You know, as soon as Gil started cooking in the pan, I'm like, wow, that's so, you know. Although we've been making pans,
I made that.
Hundreds of pans. Yeah, but it's like, no, but now it has purpose.
Yeah.
Now it has purpose.
The product's complete at that point, isn't it?
I mean, that's a plate, but it's only a plate when it's got food on it.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Is really and that was the core of the book. I've made a couple of films.
Do you think that's why whenever we spoke to craftspeople, people that make working objects is one, the thing that's always really attracted us, and two, the people that are just, the large portion of people that are super fanatic about their work are people that make working, usable objects. Not to say that artists aren't, but the people that are overwhelmingly super fanatic about what they do will be tool makers, toolsmiths, saddle makers.
Well, people use that every day. When
Yeah.
they cook, you know, they're invested in that piece every day. Same as a pair of boots, like they're
Bootmakers,
handmade.
great example, Kate.
And it's everyday,
Bootmakers.
everyday objects, you know, and it's,
A wedding
yes,
ring.
you can sort of elevate stuff. I mean, you know, sculpture has a place, and
Of course it does.
and it's amazing, and it, you know, art, great, and that's a personal choice. You know, it'd probably make a lot more money as a sculptor
Yeah.
than it would as a, you know, and there's a hierarchy of kind of snob value. There's a hierarchy of product. It's but I, you know, make an axe, go to the woods, chop some wood. It's fucking satisfying.
Yeah.
You know, it really is, and it's a really kind of core satisfaction.
Yep.
Or, you know, seeing a chef taking a plate and putting some food on it. You know, the chef sent me a picture and I nearly cried. I mean, I'm not a big crier. I'd made a single plate, tiny little plate, and it had just one piece of salmon and a little bit of soy sauce and 2 drops of oil. And that was it. And it's like, that becomes a thing.
Yeah.
It gives it purpose. Until then, effectively, it's just sort of bits of metal.
I totally agree with you.
I get it. I mean, very pretty bits of metal, but I do get
pretty
it.
bits of metal, but it has to have that kind of continuation. And we were talking about the cookbook. That idea, is to show people the end result. You know, you can have a catalogue of products, well, that's nice, but people need to use these. A lot of people don't use my knives. They're like, and they don't use the pans, and they just hang them up. I'm like, no,
These are for use.
you've got to use them, and by use, these haven't been used. Well, that one has, but by use, they develop and they change. They become what they're meant to be.
Yep.
And the other book was the blacksmithing book that I wrote.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I loved doing that, and got paid for it. So that was
There you go.
which is lucky.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
did someone publish that
Yeah,
on your
Quadrille
behalf?
published that for me. Yeah.
Nice.
Good.
So that was good. But I wrote it during lockdown. Didn't take me very long. I mean, as a dyslexic, it's quite interesting. Didn't actually take me very long.
I wanted to ask about that.
Spell check.
Yeah.
And,
Loads of spell
and
check.
copy editors.
Yeah. They're just
Copy editors are worth a
amazing.
weight
Yeah.
in gold,
Oh,
by the
they
way.
are.
That was, I'm really proud of that book. I really, really enjoyed writing that.
What do you think made that so enjoyable?
To be able to kind of indulge, to study the history and the craft, and to put some of my thoughts, the graphics. I work with a brilliant graphic designer nearby
Nice.
here. So Spike and I have been working for like 8 years together.
Nice.
So as part of the contract, he had to do the graphics.
Nice.
So we
And
designed
that was something
it.
you outset in the contract.
Yeah, I said I
Yeah.
wouldn't do it without him.
Brilliant.
Oh, nice.
And we made we always, like you said, you set out with your magazine, you know, to make a product, to make a thing, to make an actual object. And that was, so we created an object
Yeah.
that happened to be a book. I love books. I mean, I'm obsessed with books.
Yeah.
I've got hundreds of books. Which is interesting for someone who couldn't read until they were quite old.
Yeah.
And then I never stopped reading. But, you know, so, I mean, how amazing to be able to make a book.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is part of legacy.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that. And I really harp on about it. It's so many people will ask, do you do a digital copy? Do you do a digital? And we do not do digital until it's been sold out, or at least it's in low stock numbers, like really due to sell out.
Yeah.
And it's because of exactly that. Like, a book is something you can keep.
People do worry about, though, like paper and like, you know, try to support the planet and stuff like that. So there you've got that argument.
I've
but we
got a
do-
counter argument to that, though, is the amount of environmental cost on keeping server farms open and on. You just don't directly see it.
Yeah, I think there's a counter argument to
Yeah.
everything, really, isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I don't know if I'm right. I'm just ardently for that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you ask them, have you deleted all your emails? You know,
Yeah.
because that how much it takes up your carbon footprint from
Yeah.
stuff that we keep on our phones. You can't.
Yeah, it's a dull.
You can't get it. It's
go
a
down
whole
a
different thing.
long
Well,
line.
you know, it's like the sustainability of blacksmithing. It's not a sustainable business, but it's also ultimately sustainable. So, you know, because everything's recyclable, but the production of steel is not ecologically sound. So, you know, where do you go? We produce an object that's going to last for 3 or 4, 5 or 6. You know, the oldest axe that I've got is 2,500 years old, still as good as it was when it was new.
That you've got is 2.5. Wow.
So there is an environmental benefit to making things that last,
Absolutely.
even if they're not eco products.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
there's this constant kind of.
And greenwashing's a thing.
I mean, we're all fucked anyway. So
it's all going downhill rapidly. So just hang on.
You have to do what you can kind of do.
Yeah.
You know.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you see, because blacksmithing isn't necessarily a sustainable craft, a sustainable business, but having a business that blacksmiths makes blacksmithing sustainable, makes the craft sustainable. You know, you just by literally hanging on to, and that no means like the business is hanging on. I know you're doing a good job of it, but by you being one of the few people that is hanging on to the craft will be more sustainable and live on.
Yeah.
The business serves you and the overarching craft, doesn't it?
I think so.
Anything you want to cover before we wrap up?
I've
covered
got
a
one
lot.
more question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Probably don't take so many drugs.
I mean, that's fair.
And in fact, that is an interesting point. So, not so much that, but I think if I looked back, I think I would have probably liked to have spent more time being little bit more serious. Mm-hmm. I think learning what I learnt later, maybe a little bit earlier on.
Yeah.
So taking it a little bit more seriously. Mm-hmm. From a slightly younger age.
Yeah.
But the sort of caveat to that is if I hadn't been on what I was doing, on where I had gone and the people I'd met, I wouldn't have come to the conclusions that I've come to. So on one hand, I probably wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
If one is essentially quite happy with where you are at any given time in your life, all your mistakes are okay.
Yeah.
I do sometimes feel that I wish I had kind of maybe not fucked around quite so much.
Yeah, a few people have said that, wishing they'd take things a bit more seriously. But then...
I'm the opposite, I wish I'd taken nothing as serious.
But in a way, you know, I know, in a way it makes... You can't really regret it. You can't really regret...
Because it's put you on the path of where you are now.
Because it's put you on the path where you are. Now, it's quite difficult to quantify that. I wouldn't take away all my years of going to raves because it was...
Character building.
It was brilliant.
You enjoyed it.
It was epic.
Yeah.
You know, we were part of the kind of first rave generation. You know, it was like this was a wonderful thing for us. You know, and I've sort of come to, like I say, you know, I sort of came to blacksmithing or to become a blacksmith quite late in my life. I see some of the younger ones are kind of, in a way, they're a little bit too serious about what they're doing now, and they're kind of missing. So they might be technically brilliant, but they're not very worldly. They're not very kind of experienced in other things. They haven't made loads of mistakes, and the only time you learn is through making mistakes.
So true.
Or one of the most, powerful times of learning is when you make mistakes. It's like making something. You know, I take a piece of steel and I try and turn it into what's in my head. And by the mistakes is how I learn how to make it. And I suppose if you look back at your life and think, well, you know, there's one or two things I probably shouldn't have done, but
I'm glad I made that
generally
mistake.
I'm pretty happy.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
No, I love it.
Where do people find out more about you, about your books, about your classes, about what you've got to sell?
All on the website,
AlexPaul.com it is?
Alex Paul Ironwork.
AlexPaulIronwork.com.
And still on the Instagram, Alex Paul Ironwork, but that's...
You're going to newsletters, aren't you? So where do you sign up to your newsletter? On your website?
Sign up to the newsletter on the website. So the website is the kind of where it's all at nowadays,
Yeah, awesome.
Kate, where do people find out about us? Because that's the one thing we keep forgetting to tell people that are listening.
Yeah, so we have a quarterly magazine And you can purchase that on www.wearemakers.shop.
Or the newsletter on wearemakers.info.
So we've gone hard on newsletters because we do
anywhere where you can put your email address.
Yeah, that is gold these
brilliant.
days. Like signing people up in a newsletter, that is gold.
Yeah.
Because you're getting all their attention. I mean, I know everybody's got a newsletter these days, and everybody has to pick which newsletter they really want to read. But
but they have a choice in that, which is really quite nice.
Yes, exactly.
And you can subscribe and unsubscribe and resubscribe and. Yeah. I subscribe to newsletters and then I read them and I think, and it's really easy now. Yeah. It's not like you're locked in. Yeah. But it is a very, very nice way to communicate with people.
Yes.
Yes. I also go through periods where I'll subscribe to loads and then I'll unsubscribe them. I'll kind of have a cull. Yeah. And then every so often I'll have unsubscribed from one that wasn't interesting me at the time and then I'll I've not heard about such and such for a while, so I'll go and resubscribe. Yeah. Life will get busy and I don't want loads of emails in my inbox, you know, that kind of thing. We actually talked the other day about setting up another email just for newsletters. Yeah. So it was effectively like a social feed that you can just go through every so often. Yeah. Because I don't want them all in my normal inbox, but if I've got a newsletter inbox, it's... The other thing, the amount of people I follow on Instagram, never see them. No. Yeah. I only found out the other day that if you click the Instagram logo in the top left corner, you can change your feed to people you actually follow, rather than... See, there you go. Everyone I've said to is like, can you? I only found that out the other day by accident.
I mean, I've started going through and culling I'm sort of unfollowing people that I suppose I don't look at, or actually I'm a bit more strict people. I've started unfollowing a lot of content makers if I think it's vacuous content. Yep. There's so much sponsorship, there's so much selling. Lots of people I've kind of lost interest in or whatever. So to try and reduce it back to a core of people who are interesting. But also getting away, we're bombarded by all the different platforms.
Yeah. It's constant.
It's constant and it's not healthy.
No.
And if one feels it's not healthy, why would I want to try and push it?
Yeah.
I was going to turn my Instagram account off.
Interesting.
When I hit 50,000. But my son said, don't do that. He said it would be a bad idea.
It feels like a bad idea, but equally I understand the sentiment of you don't want to feed into something that is becoming...
And a lot of people are doing that, to be fair. They're just coming off it. I don't agree with it anymore, so I'm just not putting my energy into it.
But where do we go? We've
sort of other option.
I know we're meant to have been wrapping this up, but it is quite important actually for the... So, we've talked about the past. If you've still got time to talk about it, I think that is probably what I want to talk about is the future. Yeah. Actually, what happens now, and this is there's been a sort of big weight, lots of discussion here. How do craftspeople sell their work? Yes, okay, it's great for me to say I can make stuff and I don't want to sell it and all this kind of stuff. I make for myself. This is all true, but also I run a business and I'm trying to pay people. I'm trying to pay myself. And fundamentally, I want people to learn about blacksmithing, or to at least look at it and see its value in the 21st century. And that's been a massive passion of mine for years. It's like, let's make it relevant to now. We are not reenactors, which I love, reenactment, but we are not museum pieces. We are functioning, important cultural ambassadors. Yep. To be able to do that, we need to make a living. For the last 5 years, we've rested on Instagram. That's, previous to COVID, it was get out and sell it. And that was great. It was a lot of my kids' childhood I've missed, but that's kind of okay, It doesn't really matter, but, and then COVID came, all the festivals stopped, most of the markets stopped, the business changed. We went online, so now we have to service a website. That's not working anymore. So what happens next? And that's the biggest sort of question for us, to go, how do we engage with the people? Yes, there's a newsletter, but everyone's got 20 or 30 different platforms running on their phones. Most people do, whether it's Patreon or YouTube, Instagram and blah, blah, blah. And it's all disconnected. So how do makers, is a question for you, how are makers going to sell their products?
Yep. It's a question we talk about often, especially with the demise of platforms like Etsy and stuff like that are just turning into a trove. imported nonsense, you know.
Yeah.
It's like,
So many people I know, like family members, have just been totally ripped off and didn't get their products, and it's awful. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
or got complete fakes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or a fake, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's.
Markets are quite difficult. Lots of councils don't want to support markets because they don't get enough money from them. You know, and then it involves a lot of transport, a lot of time away. You know, we used to do the Froome market. I don't know if you've heard, there was a town here called Froome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And
stayed
then
in it. I was doing a shoot here 3 or 4 years ago in Salisbury Plains, and we stayed in Froome. It was lovely.
Absolutely amazing street market. That's changed quite a lot, and there's a lot of street food. So for makers and craftspeople, it's quite a difficult time.
People are there for the food rather than just buying
Yeah.
the. Yeah.
And
And
it's
it's
a huge
been
investment
easy.
up
Put
front.
something on Instagram, it sells. You know, last month probably was the first time I've put an axe on Instagram and haven't sold them.
Really?
That's interesting. Yeah, whenever we put anything like, go and buy a magazine, it's the worst performing.
Always.
Always.
Yeah, people don't want to be sold to. The
Yeah.
algorithm. Okay, axes. It's quite difficult to sell axes because they're sharp and they don't want to sell them. But also all sorts of things, you know. And
Even wholesale's difficult
yeah,
because we distribute the magazine, but we don't make money from it. Like it's purely just we want to be on the shelves because
Yeah.
people then see what we're doing and then maybe they'll subscribe to it later on. You know, they'll come to us instead of I don't know, but it's just working
Where
out.
do you put your stuff so it gets seen?
Yeah, it's
yeah. So and that will be interesting to see how it develops. How are we going to be able to sell stuff? And when we thought about, you know, trying to get people to come here, it's quite out of the way. It's quite high street doesn't really work.
Yeah.
What's
so
next?
it'll be interesting to see how.
Yeah.
What do you think your plan is?
I mean, I do think the newsletter is going to be helpful.
Yep.
I think
And
so.
maybe subscription. Sort of vaguely thinking of doing pop-ups. Like selling knives is going to be practically impossible.
Yeah.
You can't, you know, obviously through your own website you can, and that's fine, but you have age restrictions and things like that. So that's going to be quite difficult for a lot of makers. You know, selling frying pans is quite easy.
Yeah.
In a sense, because there's no restrictions. I don't really have an answer, and I'm not quite sure. I think it's got to be, you know, your own personal. I could go back to doing markets. We're doing doing a market in a couple of weeks' time. Might go back to selling direct. I like selling to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's at a cost, you know. It'll cost us 700 quid just to turn up.
Yeah.
It can be a risk for a lot of makers. You know, you go and not sell a thing, and then
Yeah.
it's just like.
I mean, I used to do Bath Christmas market. We'd be looking at like 7 to 8 grand in just before you even.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you make your money, but it's quite a big risk. So.
And it's all upfront money, isn't it?
And it's all up front, so it's a balance. So it'd be interesting. I mean, I don't think there will be any other social media platforms unless someone creates something specific.
Yeah.
But it's getting people like customers to go to that. Like it's something brand new and
Yeah. How do you get people onto it?
it's. I'm sure there's somebody working on something, but
Well, we've been approached by a couple of people. They're kind of design-led sales platforms.
Yep.
But how do they grow? And people
I
are
know.
quite
I know this.
cautious now about
Yeah.
signing up for things.
Yeah.
And inevitably, the people who run the sites are the ones that make the money with the least amount of
Always.
risk.
Always the case.
Yes.
Yes.
Very
So it'd be
difficult.
interesting to see how it and I think for young, I mean for maybe people in my position it's much easier, but for newer makers coming, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, you've kind of got the foundations behind you already set up, haven't you?
Yeah, I can pivot. I mean, I could stop making and teach, and not that I want to do that necessarily, but you know, we've got enough demand, or we're quite. The joy of having quite a multifaceted business is that we can move. We could go into garden tools, or we can just make axes, or we can just make knives or pans, or you know, there's quite a lot of. It makes it more difficult to manage, but it means we can pivot quite easily.
Yeah.
But for people coming into the industry, it must be really quite hard for them.
Yeah.
Yes, we can
Yeah.
see.
I know that Jack, who's set up his hammer business here, really difficult for him, you know, because he can't afford a website, or was building it, but you know, it takes time. Instagram's not working. You know, Etsy's difficult.
Yep. Yeah, where do you build, like you say, when you're already set up, you can pivot, but you need to get up that ladder. And those first few rungs are really far apart.
Yeah, and hard to manage.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, we'll see.
We'll find out.
But end on a positive note, that was a really good conversation.
Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah.
It was awesome, like 5 and a bit years later.
Yeah.
To come here and see it all in person and meet you in person.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If it made you smile today or feel inspired, hit follow, leave us a review, or share it with a fellow maker. It really means the world. If you'd like to support what we do even more, you can subscribe to our quarterly print magazine, where you'll find even more maker stories in every edition. We'd also like to share that we're working on the We Are Makers grant. Once we reach 2,500 magazine subscribers, we'll be giving 11% of all our subscriptions directly to makers to help fund tools, travel, photo shoots, or anything that moves their craft forward. Find the link to all of this in our show notes. We'll see you soon, wherever the next story takes us.